What if Khal Drogo never died? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The great Khal lies motionless on the furs within his tent, sweat beading across his bronze skin. The wound from his battle with Khal Drogo festers along his chest, the edges red and angry. 3 days have passed since the arak found its mark, and the infection spreads like poison through his veins. Daenerys kneels beside her husband, her violet eyes filled with fear as she watches his labored breathing. The strongest man she has ever known burns with fever, his mighty frame trembling with each shallow breath. Khaleesi. Jorah Mormont steps into the tent, his weathered face grave. Behind him follows Mirri Maz Duur, the Maegi they captured from the burning village. The woman's dark eyes gleam with something that makes Daenerys' skin crawl. Yet the witch says she can heal him. Blood magic, she claims. Daenerys looks up at her protector, then down at Drogo's still form. The temptation gnaws at her. Her sun and stars lies dying before her eyes, and this woman offers salvation. But something in Mirri Maz Duur's smile speaks of revenge, not healing. What price would such magic demand? Daenerys asks, her voice barely above a whisper. The Maegi's lips curve upward. Only life can pay for life, Khaleesi. But I can save him. I can bring back your call stronger than before. Jorah steps forward, his hand resting on his sword hilt. My queen, I've seen what blood magic costs. In Ashai, in Korth, the price is always higher than what they tell you. Daenerys stares at the woman who offers hope wrapped in darkness. Every instinct screams at her to reject this witch's bargain, but the child in her womb kicks as if sensing the danger. She thinks of the prophecy, the stallion who mounts the world. If she loses Drogo now, what becomes of their son's destiny? No. The word comes out firm, final. We will not use your magic, woman. Guards, escort her from my sight. Mirri Maz Duur's face twists with rage. You will watch him die then, Dragon Queen. You will watch your stallion fall and your dreams crumble to ash. Remove her, Daenerys commands. The Dothraki guards seize the Magi and drag her from the tent. Her curses echo across the camp before fading into silence. Jorah nods approvingly at his queen's decision. Bring me the healers, Daenerys orders. The old women who know the ancient ways. Bring every herb and poultice in the Khalasar. For the next 3 days and nights, Daenerys does not leave Drogo's side. The elderly Dothraki women work tirelessly, applying cooling cloths soaked in bitter herbs to his burning skin. They force thin broths between his lips and pack his wound with healing moss gathered from the riverbanks. Daenerys holds his massive hand in both of hers, whispering stories of Vyas Dothrak and the throne he will claim in Westeros. On the 4th dawn, the fever breaks. Drogo's eyes flutter open, dark and clear for the first time in days. He looks up at his Khaleesi and manages a weak smile. My moon and stars, he whispers in Dothraki. His voice is hoarse but strong. Tears of relief stream down Daenerys' face. My sun and stars, you have returned to me. I dreamed of green lands across the narrow sea, Drogo says, struggling to sit upright. Daenerys helps support him, marveling at the steadiness returning to his movements. I dreamed of iron chairs and stone castles falling before our horses. Rest now, she tells him. Heal your strength. We have time for conquest when you are whole again. But Drogo shakes his head. Time is what we do not have, moon of my life. Word came while I burned with sickness. The usurper Robert is dead. The Iron Throne sits empty, while pretender kings squabble like dogs over a bone. Daenerys' breath catches. Robert Baratheon dead? The man who ordered her family's destruction, who sent assassins to kill her across the narrow sea, gone at last. How did he die? She asks. Jorah steps forward. A hunting accident, according to the ravens. Gored by a boar while drinking wine. His brothers claim the throne now. Stannis and Renly both style themselves king. And in the north, the wolf pup, Robb Stark, has declared independence from the Iron Throne. Drogo's eyes burn with new fire. The Seven Kingdoms tear themselves apart. This is our moment, Khaleesi. While they bleed each other, we strike. You are not yet strong enough to ride, Daenerys protests. I am strong enough to lead, Drogo replies, his voice growing firmer with each word. Strong enough to see my son born and watch him take what is ours by right. As if summoned by his words, pain shoots through Daenerys' belly. She gasps and doubles over as the first contraction grips her. The baby is coming. The birthing is swift and fierce, like everything in Dothraki life. The elderly women attend her as Drogo sits nearby, his strength returning with each passing hour. When the child's cries finally fill the tent, Daenerys weeps with joy and exhaustion. "'Tis a son," the midwife announces, placing the squalling infant in Daenerys' arms. A prince of the blood. Drogo leans over to gaze at his heir, and his face softens with wonder. The baby has his father's dark hair and his mother's violet eyes, a perfect blend of dragon and horse. "Rhaego," Daenerys whispers, naming him for her brother, Rhaegar, the stallion who mounts the world. "He will have the Seven Kingdoms for his cradle," Drogo vows, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. "Every castle will know his name. Every lord will kneel before the Dragon Prince." Outside the tent, word spreads through the Khalasar like wildfire. The Khal lives. The prince is born. The prophecy unfolds. Dothraki warriors beat their araks against their shields in celebration, the sound rolling across the grasslands like thunder. Within a fortnight, riders arrive from other Khalasars. Word of Drogo's miraculous recovery and his son's birth draws them like moths to flame. The strongest call in living memory has cheated death itself and fathered the promised stallion. They come to pledge their strength to his cause. 40,000 riders have sworn to us, Jorah reports as he watches the growing encampment. More arrive each day. Your Khalasar grows beyond anything the Dothraki have seen. Daenerys nurses baby Rhaego as she listens to the reports. Her son is strong and healthy, already showing the fierce temperament of his bloodline. When he cries, it sounds like the roar of dragons. "How many ships will we need?" she asks. "For 100,000 riders and horses?" Jorah shakes his head. "More than have ever been built. Illyrio Mopatis sends word from Pentos. He can provide vessels, but it will take time to gather such a fleet." Drogo appears at the tent entrance, fully armored for the first time since his illness. His wound has healed to a thin scar across his chest, and his strength has returned tenfold. The brush with death has changed him, focused his purpose. "Time is a luxury kings do not have," he declares. "The Iron Throne waits for no man. We sail for Westeros with the next moon." Daenerys looks down at their son, then up at her husband. The three of them, dragon, horse, and the stallion who will mount the world. The prophecy made flesh, ready to reclaim what fire and blood built. "Then let us prepare for war," she says quietly. "Let the Seven Kingdoms tremble, for winter is not the only thing coming for them." Drogo's smile is fierce and full of promise. "The dragons return, my moon and stars, and this time we bring the entire Dothraki Sea with us." The grass sea stretches endlessly in all directions, but now it ripples with more than wind. Horses thunder across the plains in numbers that beggar belief. From distant Khalasars they come, drawn by tales of the Khal who conquered death itself and fathered the promised prince. Each dawn brings new banners, new riders, new pledges of allegiance to Drogo's growing host. Daenerys stands outside her tent, baby Rhaego sleeping against her chest, watching the organized chaos of the expanding camp. Dothraki warriors practice with their araks, while their horses graze nearby. Children run between the tents, or their laughter mixing with the sound of hammering as smiths forge new weapons. The smell of roasted meat and mare's milk fills the air. 60,000 now, Jorah Mormont reports, approaching with a leather scroll in his weathered hands. More arrive each day. Word of your recovery has spread across all the Dothraki nations, my Khal. Drogo nods, his dark eyes surveying his growing army with satisfaction. The scar across his chest has healed cleanly, leaving only a thin white line as proof of his brush with death. His strength has returned threefold, as if the ordeal purged weakness from his body. They come because they sense the changing of the world, Drogo replies in accented common tongue, a language he has been practicing with increasing frequency. The stallion who mounts the world has been born. The old prophecies wake from their slumber. Jorah unfurls the scroll, revealing a detailed map of Westeros, marked with coloured pins and notations. My queen, the situation across the narrow sea grows more chaotic by the day. Fresh intelligence from my contacts in the free cities. Daenerys shifts Rhaego to one arm and studies the map intently. Since her son's birth, she has thrown herself into learning the intricacies of Westerosi politics with the same passion she once applied to mastering Dothraki customs. Every evening, Jorah tutors her in the histories and rivalries of the great houses. Tell me, she commands, Ned Stark is dead. Jorah's voice is heavy with regret. Executed on the steps of the great Sept of Baelor by order of King Joffrey. They say he confessed to treason, but those who knew him call it coercion. Daenerys feels a chill despite the warm sun. She remembers the stern-faced Lord of Winterfell from her brother's bitter stories. An honourable man, by all accounts. His death signals that honour itself dies in the Game of Thrones. His son? She asks. Robb Stark has called the northern banners and marched south with 20,000 men. But here's where it becomes interesting. Jorah points to the north on the map. He's declared himself king in the north, not fighting for Joffrey's throne, but independence from it entirely. Drogo leans closer to the map, his finger tracing the borders between kingdoms. How many kings now claim the Iron Chair? 5, by last count, Jorah replies. Joffrey holds King's Landing, but his legitimacy dies with each passing day. His uncles Stannis and Renly both press their own claims, Stannis from Dragonstone, Renly from Storm's End. In the Iron Islands, Balon Greyjoy stirs as well, and now Robb Stark rules the north. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand, Daenerys murmurs, remembering one of Jorah's lessons. They weaken themselves with every battle. Precisely, my queen. While they bleed each other white, we gather strength. Jorah's scarred face shows approval. But we must move quickly. Wars end, and we want to arrive while chaos still reigns. A commotion from the edge of camp draws their attention. Riders approach under a banner bearing the golden sigil of Pentos. At their head rides a plump figure on a palfrey, his oiled beard gleaming in the sunlight. Illyrio Mopatis, Daenerys breathes. The magister who arranged her marriage to Drogo has come in person. The Pentoshi merchant dismounts with obvious discomfort, his silk robes ill-suited to the grasslands. He approaches with the cautious deference of a man surrounded by 100,000 Dothraki warriors. Khal Drogo, Illyrio says, attempting a bow that his bulk makes awkward. Khaleesi, the news of your recovery has reached Pentos. Truly the gods smile upon your house. You bring ships, Drogo states, rather than asks. His patience for the fat man's flowery words has never been great. Ships, yes. Provisions, weapons, supplies. Illyrio produces another scroll, this one bearing seals and tallies. 300 vessels of various sizes. Enough to transport your entire host across the narrow sea, although it will require multiple crossings. Daenerys studies the manifest with growing excitement. Merchant cogs, war galleys, even converted slave ships, a motley fleet, but sufficient for their purposes. The cost? She inquires. Illyrio's smile is oily. Consider it an investment in the restoration of House Targaryen. When you sit the Iron Throne, Pentos remembers its friends. Drogo snorts. You seek profit, not friendship. What do you truly want, Cheese Lord? The Magister's composure slips slightly. Trading privileges, protection for Pentoshi merchants in Westerosi waters, perhaps a seat on your small council when the time comes. We will consider your terms, Daenerys replies diplomatically. How long to ready the fleet? The ships are already gathering at the docks. Within the moon's turn, all will be prepared. Illyrio mops sweat from his brow with a silk cloth. But I must ask, are you certain of this course? Westeros is not the free cities. The people there have never known foreign conquest. Drogo's hand drops to his arak. They will learn. The strong take what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. The Dothraki way, Daenerys adds, but her voice carries thoughtfulness. Yet we do not come as simple raiders, Magister. We come to rule. That requires different tactics. That evening, as the camp settles into its nightly routines, Daenerys sits with Jorah beside a small fire. Baby Rhaego sleeps in his cradle, his tiny fists clenched as if grasping for his future kingdom. Maps and scrolls surround them, covered with battle plans and supply lists. Tell me about castles, Daenerys requests. How do the Westerosi fight from behind their stone walls? Jorah pokes the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the night sky. Stone walls can stop horses, my queen. Dothraki excel on open ground, but siege warfare is different. Patience, planning. Sometimes, starvation is the only way to crack a determined defense. Then we must ensure they cannot retreat behind their walls, she muses. Strike fast, before they can organize proper resistance. The divided kingdoms help us there, Jorah agrees. Castles require garrisons, and every lord who marches to war leaves his holdings lightly defended. If we land in multiple places simultaneously, chaos, Daenerys finishes. They cannot defend everywhere at once. Across the camp, Drogo stands before his carls, their voices carrying on the night wind. He speaks of green lands and wealth beyond imagining, of horses that swim through salt water and enemies who hide behind stone like women. The assembled war leaders laugh and beat their chests, eager for the conquest to come. 80,000 now, one of Drogo's blood riders reports to the group around the fire. More tribes pledge themselves each day. Soon we will be the largest Khalasar in the history of the Dothraki. Numbers mean nothing if we cannot feed them, Daenerys points out, or transport them across the sea. The grasslands can support 100,000 horses for now, Jorah calculates. But you're right about the crossing. Even with Illyrio's fleet, we'll need to travel in waves. The first group establishes a beachhead, then more follow. Daenerys rocks Rhaego gently as she considers the implications. My husband will want to lead the first wave. He's not a man who follows. No, but he's a man who wins, Jorah replies with grudging respect. And that may be exactly what Westeros needs to see. The return of dragons, backed by the might of the Dothraki Sea. In the distance, a horn sounds 3 times, the signal for new arrivals. More riders emerge from the darkness, their horses lathered with sweat from hard travel. They carry news, fresh intelligence from the chaos consuming the 7 kingdoms. What word? Drogo calls out in Dothraki as the messengers approach his gathering. The lead rider slides from his mount and kneels. Great Khal, the boy King Joffrey has named Tywin Lannister as his hand. The old lion marches toward the Riverlands with a great host, and blood flows already between the wolves and lions. Drogo's teeth gleam white in the firelight. Good. Let them sharpen each other's teeth. When we arrive, there will be less work for us. Daenerys stands, her son still sleeping peacefully, despite the activity around them. The prophecy whispers in her mind, the stallion who mounts the world. Soon, very soon, young Rhaego will see the lands his father means to conquer for him. How long until we reach the coast? She asks. 7 days hard riding, comes the reply. The ships wait for us there. Then we ride at dawn, Drogo declares, his voice carrying across the camp. The dragon returns to Westeros, and all the world will tremble at our passing. The assembled Khals roar their approval, the sound rolling across the grasslands like thunder before a storm. Somewhere in the distance, our horses whinny in response, as if they too sense that history balances on the edge of a blade. Westeros bleeds itself in civil war, unknowing that an even greater storm gathers strength beyond the narrow sea. The stallion who mounts the world sleeps in his mother's arms, while 100,000 Dothraki warriors prepare to carry him toward his destiny. The dragons are coming, and this time they bring the fury of the eternal grass sea with them. The harbour at Pentos groans under the weight of the largest fleet ever assembled in the Free Cities. 300 ships of every size and design crowd the docks, merchant cogs with their bellies emptied for horses, war galleys bristling with oars, even repurposed slave ships fitted with ramps for loading livestock. The salty air carries the scent of tar and rope, demixed with the familiar smell of horses and leather that follows the Dothraki wherever they ride. Khal Drogo stands on the stone pier, his dark eyes fixed on the endless blue expanse stretching toward the horizon. Behind him, 100,000 Dothraki warriors mass in the greatest gathering their people have ever known. But for all their courage in battle, many shift uneasily at the sight of so much water. The sea is anathema to their horse-bound culture, a poisoned vastness that swallows ships and men alike. "The poisoned water," mutters Kotho, one of Drogo's most trusted blood riders. His weathered face shows the same distrust that ripples through the assembled Khals. It is not natural for men to ride wooden horses across the great emptiness. Drogo turns to face his war leaders, his presence commanding immediate silence. The scar across his chest has healed completely, but its memory serves as proof of his strength. He survived what would have killed lesser men, and that miracle draws followers like a flame draws moths. "I have dreamed of green lands beyond the salt water," Drogo declares in ringing Dothraki. "I have seen stone castles falling before our horses, and iron men kneeling in the dirt. The prophecy cannot be fulfilled from grass and wind alone." Koholo, another blood rider, steps forward. "Great Khal, the horses fear the moving water. Many will not board the wooden ships. How can Dothraki fight without their strength?" "The same way we have always fought," Drogo replies. "With courage and blood and steel. Our enemies hide behind stone walls because they fear to meet us on equal ground. Now we bring the fight to their own earth." Daenerys approaches, carrying baby Rhaego in her arms. The child has grown stronger in the weeks since his birth, his violet eyes bright with curiosity as he watches the ships. Her presence calms some of the tension among the Khals, though uncertainty still clouds their faces. "My sun and stars speaks truth," she says in carefully pronounced Dothraki. "But courage alone will not move horses onto ships. Show them the way, as a Khal must always lead." Drogo nods slowly, understanding her wisdom. Words mean nothing to warriors who have never seen the sea. Only action can overcome generations of fear and superstition. "Bring my horse," he commands. His massive black stallion is led forward, snorting nervously at the unfamiliar smells and sounds of the harbour. The animal's ears lay flat against its skull, eyes rolling white at the sight of so much water. If even Drogo's own mount shows fear, how can he expect his followers to be braver? Drogo swings into the saddle with fluid grace, then guides his horse toward the nearest ship, a sturdy Pentoshi cog with wide ramps built for loading cargo. The stallion balks at the wooden planks, refusing to step onto the unfamiliar surface. Murmurs ripple through the watching crowd. If the great Khal cannot even board a ship, what hope do they have? "Easy, my friend," Drogo murmurs to his mount, his voice carrying the same confidence he shows in battle. "We go to win an empire for the little prince. There is nothing to fear from wood and rope." With patient pressure from his knees and gentle guidance from the reins, Drogo coaxes his stallion up the ramp and onto the ship's deck. The horse's hooves clatter against the wooden planks, a sound that will echo in Dothraki memory for generations. The watching warriors fall silent, awed by this unprecedented sight, their Khal and his horse standing aboard a vessel meant for the dreaded sea. "Who follows Drogo across the poisoned water?" the Khal roars from the ship's rail. "Who rides wooden horses to claim the iron chair for the stallion who mounts the world?" The response comes slowly at first. Kotho leads his own horse up the ramp, his jaw set with determination. Then Kaholo follows, and after him, Hago. One by one, the blood riders board ships with their mounts, setting an example that ripples through the assembled Khalasar. But not all are so easily convinced. Older Khals mutter among themselves, though some refusing outright to board the vessels. Their lifetime of superstition wars with loyalty to Drogo's vision. "The sea will swallow us all," declares Baharbo, a grizzled Khal whose scars tell of countless battles. "This is not the Dothraki way. We are meant for grass and wind, not salt and storm." Several hundred warriors nod agreement, their hands resting on their araks. For a moment, the great undertaking hangs in the balance. Will the Khalasar fracture before the crossing even begins? Daenerys steps forward, baby Rhaego still in her arms. She begins to climb the ramp to join her husband, her violet eyes blazing with determination. The assembled Dothraki watch in stunned silence as their Khaleesi boards the ship with the promised prince, showing a courage that shames their hesitation. "Like the mother of the stallion who mounts the world fears no poison water," she calls out in ringing Dothraki. She carries the future in her arms and sails toward its destiny. Who among you claims greater bravery than a woman with child? The challenge strikes home. Dothraki culture prizes strength above all else, and to be shamed by a woman, even their beloved Khaleesi, cuts deeper than any blade. Warriors begin moving toward the ships in growing numbers, their pride overcoming their fear. The loading takes 3 full days. Horses must be blindfolded and led aboard in small groups, their natural terror of water making each animal a struggle. Some ships lose mounts to panic, horses breaking their legs in falls or going mad from fear. But gradually, impossibly, the great migration takes shape. Sir Jorah Mormont coordinates with the Pentoshi captains, his experience with ships proving invaluable. "Space the fleet widely during the crossing," he advises Daenerys as they stand on the deck of the lead vessel. "If we encounter storms, we don't want ships colliding in rough seas." "How long to reach Westeros?" Daenerys asks, adjusting the blanket around sleeping Rhaego. The baby seems unaffected by the ship's gentle rocking, already more adaptable than many grown warriors. 4 days with good winds, Jorah calculates. Perhaps a week if the weather turns against us. The narrow sea can be treacherous this time of year. The fleet sets sail as the sun reaches its zenith, 300 ships spreading across the water like a vast wooden city in motion. From the lead cog, Daenerys watches the Essos coastline shrink behind them, as everything she has ever known disappears beyond the horizon, leaving only endless blue stretching in all directions. The first day passes without incident. The sea remains calm, barely more than swells that make the horses nervous, but cause no real distress. Dothraki warriors sit in uncharacteristic silence, their eyes fixed on the alien world of water surrounding them. Some pray to the great stallion, others simply endure with stoic determination. But on the second night, clouds gather on the northern horizon. The storm strikes without warning, transforming the gentle swells into towering walls of water that crash over the ship's rails. Wind howls like a wounded beast, tearing at the sails and rigging with supernatural fury. The fleet scatters as captains fight to keep their vessels afloat in the chaos. Aboard the lead ship, Drogo grips the rail with white knuckles as spray soaks through his leather vest. His horse whinnies in terror from the cargo hold below, the sound lost in the wind's roar. Around them, other ships struggle against the storm's fury, dark shapes glimpsed through sheets of rain before vanishing again. "How many do we lose?" Drogo shouts over the tempest. Jorah peers into the darkness, trying to count the scattered lights of the fleet. "Hard to say. At least a dozen ships have fallen behind. Maybe more," Daenerys clutches Rhaego close to her chest, protecting him from the driving rain with her cloak. The child cries constantly now, sensing his mother's fear and the ship's violent motion. This is the first true test of their great gamble. Will the sea claim their army before they even reach Westeros? The storm rages for 6 hours before finally breaking apart against its own fury. Dawn reveals a changed world, the fleet spread across miles of ocean, some ships limping with damaged sails, others missing entirely. The careful formations of the previous day have scattered like leaves in a gale. But they endure. Ship by ship, the survivors gather into a loose formation and continue westward. The losses sting. Perhaps 3,000 warriors and twice as many horses claimed by the hungry sea, but the great majority remains intact. On the 4th day, a cry goes up from the crow's nest. "Land! Land ahead!" Drogo climbs the rigging with the agility of a natural sailor, his eyes straining to see what the lookout has spotted. There, shimmering like a green jewel on the western horizon, lies the coast of Westeros. The continent of his dreams stretches north and south as far as the eye can see, forests and hills and the promise of conquest. "Behold," he calls down to the assembled warriors, "the land where our sons will be princes, and our horses will graze in the gardens of kings." The fleet makes landfall at multiple points along the coast, just as Jorah advised. Some ships beach themselves on the sandy shores south of King's Landing, others find harbours further north in the Crown Lands. The strategy prevents any single force from stopping the invasion, but it also means the Khalasar must reunite quickly before Westerosi armies can respond. As Drogo's own ship scrapes against the beach, he leaps into the surf with his arak raised high. The salt water swirls around his boots as he wades ashore, or the first Dothraki Khal to set foot on Westerosi soil in living memory. "I name this land mine," he roars in common tongue, his voice carrying across the beach where thousands of warriors struggle to unload their terrified horses. "By right of conquest and strength of arms, I claim the 7 kingdoms for the stallion who mounts the world." Behind him, Daenerys steps carefully from the ship with baby Rhaego in her arms. The child has stopped crying, his violet eyes wide as he sees the foreign land that will be his kingdom. Somewhere in the distance, smoke rises from a village that has spotted the invasion fleet. Soon, ravens will carry word to King's Landing that dragons have returned to Westeros. But for now, in this moment of triumph and terror, 100,000 Dothraki warriors stream ashore like a tide of steel and horsehair. Or the conquest has begun, and nothing will ever be the same. The wooden horses have carried them across the poisoned water. Now the real horses will carry them to the Iron Throne. The fishing village of Dire Den has known peace for 3 generations. Its wooden docks stretch into the narrow sea like fingers reaching toward prosperity. Nets hang heavy with the morning catch, while children play between the boats, their laughter mixing with seagull cries. The villagers know nothing of the chaos consuming the 7 kingdoms. They have heard rumors of war between the great houses, but such things seem distant as summer storms. Then the horizon catches fire. The first Dothraki ships appear as dark specks against the dawn sky, their sails billowing with foreign wind. By midday, the beach crawls with horses and riders, their curved blades catching sunlight like scales on some vast serpent. The villagers freeze in terror at the sight, more warriors than they have ever imagined, speaking a harsh tongue that sounds like breaking metal. Drogo rides at their head, his massive stallion dancing with eagerness for the slaughter to come. Behind him stream his Khals and blood riders, their faces painted with the joy of conquest. These are not the careful siege lines of Westerosi armies. This is the Dothraki way. Swift, brutal, total. The village dies in minutes. Houses burst into flame as riders hurl burning brands through windows. Men who try to resist fall beneath curved steel that moves like water. Women and children flee screaming toward the woods, but Dothraki horses are faster than terror. The lucky ones die quickly. but the others face a fate worse than death in the slave markets that will follow the conquest. From her position on a hill overlooking the destruction, Daenerys watches with baby Rhaego pressed close to her chest. The child sleeps through the screaming, innocent of the blood being spilled in his name. Jorah Mormont stands beside her, his scarred face grim as he observes the systematic devastation. "It has to be this way," he says quietly, though his voice carries doubt. "Fear is the only language these people understand. Mercy will be seen as weakness." Daenerys says nothing, but her violet eyes reflect the flames consuming the village below. This is the price of conquest, the terrible mathematics of power written in smoke and blood. Her ancestors took Westeros with fire and dragons. She reclaims it with fire and horse. "How many more villages before they take notice?" she asks. "Not many," Jorah replies. "Word travels fast when the world burns." 3 days later, the first ravens reach King's Landing. King Joffrey sits the Iron Throne with all the petulant authority of his 13 years, the twisted metal cutting into his thin frame. The throne room buzzes with the nervous energy of a court at war. Lords and ladies whisper in corners about the battles raging in the Riverlands, where his grandfather Tywin fights the northern pretender, Robb Stark. Grandmeister Pycelle hobbles forward with a scroll clutched in his trembling hands. His ancient face shows the strain of sleepless nights spent coordinating the realm's response to multiple crises. "Your Grace," he begins, his voice quavering with age and fear. "Disturbing news from the eastern shores, or reports of foreign invaders." Joffrey's pale eyes narrow with interest. Anything that breaks the tedium of ruling appeals to his cruel nature. "Invaders? From where?" "Across the narrow sea, Your Grace. The reports speak of Dothraki. Tens of thousands of them, with horses and curved swords. They have landed at multiple points along the coast and begun moving inland." The throne room falls silent, except for the crackle of torches and the distant sound of wind through the high windows. Dothraki in Westeros, the idea seems impossible, like children's stories come to terrifying life. "Dothraki don't sail," scoffs Lord Janos Slynt, his jowls quivering with authority. "Savages who fear the water like cats. Someone spreads false tales." Pycelle shakes his head gravely. "Multiple sources confirm it, my lord. Fishing villages burned, settlements abandoned. The survivors speak of a great host led by someone claiming to be Daenerys Targaryen." The name hits the court like a thunderclap. Daenerys Targaryen, the beggar princess who fled across the narrow sea as a child. If she has returned with a Dothraki army, it means only one thing. "The dragon bitch wants her throne back," Joffrey snarls, his voice cracking with adolescent rage. "Well, let her come. We'll give her the same welcome we gave her father." But even as the boy king blusters, wiser heads recognize the magnitude of the threat. A Dothraki invasion during civil war creates a nightmare scenario that could destroy the realm entirely. Lord Varys steps from the shadows, his soft hands folded within his silk sleeves. "Your Grace, perhaps we should recall Lord Tywin from the Riverlands. As if the reports prove accurate, we face an enemy unlike any Westeros has known." "My grandfather fights the traitor Stark," Joffrey snaps. "He cannot abandon that war for ghost stories and rumors." "Begging your pardon, Your Grace," Varys replies with silky courtesy. "But ghosts do not burn fishing villages or put entire populations to the sword. The Dothraki way of war is comprehensive in its devastation." Meanwhile, 200 miles north, Tywin Lannister receives similar reports in his command tent outside River Run. The Lord of Casterly Rock studies the intelligence with the cold calculation that has made him the most feared man in Westeros. Maps cover his table, marked with the positions of armies and the flow of battle lines. "How many?" he asks his captain of scouts. "Hard to say, my lord, or the survivors speak wildly. 50,000, 100,000. Mounted archers with curved swords, moving faster than any army has a right to move. Tywin's green eyes remain fixed on the map, his mind working through possibilities and probabilities. For 40 years he has played the Game of Thrones with ruthless efficiency, but this represents something new, an external threat that could render all his careful plans meaningless. And they claim Targaryen leadership? Aye, my lord. Some mad tale about Daenerys Targaryen returning with a Dothraki horde, the girl who married that savage Khal Drogo. Drogo is dead, Tywin states flatly, died of a festering wound, according to our spies in Essos. Perhaps, my lord. But dead or alive, someone leads these riders, and they're moving inland toward the Riverlands. Tywin studies the map with renewed intensity. The Riverlands, his current battlefield, where he fights to crush Robb Stark's rebellion. If a Dothraki army enters the same region, it creates a three-way conflict that no strategy can properly account for. Send word to my son, he commands. Jaime is to break off his advance and consolidate our forces. If these reports prove true, we face a war on multiple fronts. The messenger bows and hurries from the tent, leaving Tywin alone with his maps and his growing concern. For the first time in decades, the old lion faces an opponent whose moves he cannot predict. 50 miles east, that unpredictable opponent leads his Khalasar through the green hills of the Crownlands like a force of nature given form. The Drogo rides at the head of an endless column of horses and riders, their dust cloud visible for leagues in every direction. Behind him, the Dothraki Sea rolls forward with inexorable momentum. They encounter their first organized resistance at a ford across the Blackwater Rush. Lord Buckwell has gathered 300 men-at-arms in a desperate attempt to slow the invasion. His knights form a steel line across the crossing, their lances couched and banners streaming in the wind. For a moment, the scene resembles the glorious cavalry charges of Westerosi songs. Then reality intrudes. The Dothraki don't charge into the lance points like civilized knights. Instead, they flow around the ford like water around a stone, their horse archers sending clouds of arrows into the packed formation. Steel armor provides some protection, but not enough, not nearly enough. Lord Buckwell falls with 7 arrows in his chest. His men break and flee within minutes, their discipline shattered by tactics they have never encountered. The survivors spread word of an enemy that fights without honor, without rules, without mercy. Jorah Mormont rides beside Drogo as they cross the blood-stained ford, his knowledge of Westerosi warfare proving invaluable in selecting targets. "Harrenhal," he says, pointing toward a massive castle visible on the horizon. "If we take it, we control the entire region. No army can move through the Riverlands without passing under those walls." Drogo grins fiercely, his white teeth flashing in his bronze face. How many defend this stone tent? Perhaps 1,000 men, Jorah estimates, but the walls are strong. It could withstand a siege for months if properly supplied. "Siege?" Drogo laughs, the sound carrying across the grasslands. "We are Dothraki. We do not wait for walls to crumble. We break them." The assault on Harrenhal begins at dawn. The Dothraki surround the massive castle like a living sea, their war cries echoing off the ancient stones. From the battlements, the defenders watch in terror as countless riders circle their walls in an endless dance of death. But Harrenhal has stood for 3 centuries, its walls built to resist the greatest armies ever assembled. The first Dothraki assaults break like waves against stone, their ladders burning under cauldrons of boiling oil. For a moment, it seems the ancient fortress might hold against this new enemy. Then Drogo demonstrates why he commands the largest Khalasar in Dothraki history. While his warriors pin the defenders to the walls with constant attacks, he leads a picked force of his best riders around to the castle's rear. The God's Eye Lake laps against Harrenhal's foundation, a natural barrier that the builders assumed would protect their southern approach. The Dothraki swim their horses across the lake in darkness. They emerge from the water like monsters from the deep, their curved blades dripping with more than lake water. The few guards watching the supposedly secure lakeshore die before they can raise an alarm. Within minutes, Dothraki pour through the watergate that no one thought to properly defend. Harrenhal falls from within as its own walls become a trap for the defenders. The battle turns into a slaughter as Dothraki discipline meets Westerosi desperation in the narrow corridors and courtyards of the great castle. By noon, the dragon banner flies above the highest tower of Harrenhal. The conquest of the Riverland's greatest fortress takes less than a day, a feat that will echo through Westerosi history for centuries to come. Daenerys enters the great hall with baby Rhaego in her arms, stepping carefully around the bodies of men who died defending their lord's castle. The vast space, built to accommodate thousands, now holds only the silence of defeat. "This is what conquest looks like, my queen," Jorah says quietly. "Every castle, every battle, every victory writes the same story in blood." She looks down at her sleeping son, then up at the banners her followers hang from the smoke-stained rafters. And somewhere in the distance, ravens carry word of Harrenhal's fall to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. The war for Westeros has truly begun. And for the first time since the conquest, dragons fly above the greatest castle in the realm. The war pavilion of Robb Stark buzzes with the controlled chaos of an army in the field. Maps cover every surface, marked with the positions of Lannister forces and the slow, grinding progress of the siege. Outside, 20,000 northern soldiers prepare for another assault on the Lannister stronghold they have surrounded for weeks. The young king in the north studies intelligence reports, while his direwolf, Grey Wind, paces restlessly beside his chair. "The crag will fall within days," reports Sir Roderick Castle, his weathered face showing satisfaction at the progress. "What their walls crack under our mangonels, and their supplies run low. Lord Westerling sends word that he's willing to discuss terms." Robb nods absently, his attention caught by a raven that has just arrived from the east. The bird bears strange markings, not the usual seals of allied houses, but the desperate scrawl of refugees and survivors. As he breaks the wax seal, his expression changes from confidence to confusion, then to something approaching horror. "My king?" asks Lord Umber, his massive frame leaning forward with concern. "What news?" Robb reads the message twice before looking up at his assembled war council. His young face, so recently hardened by command and loss, now shows an uncertainty that chills every man present. "Harrenhal has fallen," he says quietly. "Not to any army we know, but to Dothraki raiders." The pavilion falls silent, except for the distant sounds of the siege. Dothraki. The word hangs in the air like a curse from another world. These hard northern men have heard tales of the horse lords beyond the narrow sea, but such stories belong to tavern songs, not war reports. "Impossible," growls Lord Karstark. "Dothraki fear the water like dogs fear fire. Someone spreads false intelligence to confuse our plans." "Multiple sources confirm it," Robb replies, scanning additional messages that pile up from his ravens. "Fishing villages burned along the coast, settlements abandoned, and now Harrenhal, the greatest castle in the Riverlands, taken in a single day by mounted archers with curved swords." Catelyn Stark enters the pavilion at that moment, her blue eyes immediately reading the tension among the assembled lords. Since Ned's death, she has grown harder, more calculating, but she still possesses the political wisdom that made her father's daughter. "Mother," Robb says, rising to embrace her. "Dark news from the east." Catelyn listens in growing alarm as her son recounts the reports. When he finishes, she sits heavily in a camp chair, her mind working through the implications with the speed of long experience. "Who leads them?" she asks. "The survivors speak of Daenerys Targaryen," Robb replies. "The girl who fled across the narrow sea as a child. Apparently she married a Dothraki Khal and has returned to claim her throne. With a foreign army," Catelyn adds grimly. "This changes everything, Robb. Everything we've planned, and everything we've fought for." Lord Umber pounds his fist on the table, making the maps jump. Changes nothing. We fight for justice, for Lord Ned's memory. Let the dragon girl and her savages come. We'll send them back across the sea in pieces. With what army? Catelyn asks sharply. You think 20,000 men can fight Tywin Lannister and 100,000 Dothraki simultaneously? The lords fall into heated debate, their voices rising as the reality of the situation sinks in. Everything they thought they knew about the war has shifted beneath their feet like sand in a storm. We could ally with the Lannisters, suggests Ser Rodrik quietly, his words cutting through the argument like a sword through silk. Fight the foreign threat together, settle our differences later. The suggestion triggers an explosion of outrage. Lord Karstark's face turns purple with rage, his fists clenched as if ready to strike the old master-at-arms. Ally with the men who murdered Lord Ned? He roars. Never! I'll die before I fight beside Lannister scum! We all may die if we don't, Catelyn replies coldly. Rickard, your anger honours my husband's memory, but honour won't protect the North from foreign conquest. My lady speaks wisdom, adds Maester Luwin, his grey robes rustling as he steps forward. The histories tell us that divided kingdoms fall to united enemies. Alexander conquered Persia because the satraps fought each other instead of him. But the northern lords are not easily swayed. These men followed Ned Stark out of love and loyalty, and his death demands blood payment. That the idea of making peace with his killers cuts against everything they believe about justice and honour. What would Lord Ned counsel? Asks Ser Rodrik, his voice heavy with the weight of years spent serving House Stark. Robb closes his eyes, remembering his father's lessons about duty and sacrifice. Ned Stark died for his principles, but he also died because he trusted his enemies too much. The irony tastes bitter in the young king's mouth. He would tell me to protect the North above all else, Robb says finally, to put our people before our pride. Meanwhile, 300 miles south on the island fortress of Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon receives the same intelligence with very different eyes. The rightful king, as he styles himself, sits in the painted table chamber, studying reports by the light of dancing flames. His jaw works constantly, grinding his teeth in the habit that marks his deepest thoughts. Interesting, he murmurs, his voice carrying the dry rasp that makes men nervous. The Targaryen girl returns with barbarian allies, another pretender for the throne I won by right. Sir Davos Onion Knight stands nearby, his smuggler's instincts reading the currents of opportunity that swirl around this news. Your Grace, if the reports prove true, this could serve our cause. Let the Dothraki bleed the Lannisters while we gather strength. My thoughts exactly, Stannis agrees. Every Lannister soldier who falls to horse-archer arrows is one less obstacle to my rightful rule. And if this Dragon Queen exhausts her savages against Westerosi steel... Melisandre emerges from the shadows like a red flame given form, her ruby pendant glowing in the firelight. The flames speak of great change coming, Your Grace. Old kings fall and new ones rise. Rulla shows me fire consuming the usurper's capital. Useful? Stannis replies curtly. He has little patience for the Red Priestess's mystical pronouncements, but her advice often proves valuable in practical ways. Send ravens to our supporters. Tell them to consolidate their forces and wait. Let others bleed while we prepare for the final victory. Back in the Riverlands, that bleeding has already begun. Robb Stark paces his tent like a caged wolf, weighing options that all taste of ash. Outside, his army waits for orders that could define the future of the Seven Kingdoms. The choice before him cuts to the heart of everything his family represents. We could withdraw to the north, suggests Lord Manderley. Defend the neck, let the Southerners settle their own problems with these horse lords. And abandon the Riverlands to foreign conquest? Catelyn asks. The Tullys are my family, Wyman. Would you have me sacrifice Riverrun to save Winterfell? The Riverlands cannot be held against such numbers, Robb says, his voice heavy with the burden of command. "But if we ally with the Lannisters, we might be able to establish a defensive line somewhere south of the Neck." The words feel like poison in his mouth. 3 months ago, such a thought would have been unthinkable. Now military necessity wars with personal honor, and necessity shows signs of winning. A commotion outside the tent interrupts their debate. De Garde's part to admit a party of riders under a banner of truce, but not northern banners. These men wear the crimson and gold of House Lannister, their armor dusty from hard riding. "Your Grace," the lead knight says, his voice formal but respectful. "I bring word from Lord Tywin Lannister. He requests a meeting to discuss mutual interests." Robb exchanges glances with his mother. Even Tywin Lannister, the most ruthless politician in Westeros, recognizes the magnitude of the threat bearing down on them all. "What terms does he propose?" Robb asks carefully. "A temporary cessation of hostilities, Your Grace. A joint defense against the foreign invaders. The details to be negotiated by representatives of both armies." The offer hangs in the air like a sword over all their heads. Everything they have fought for, everything they have lost, balanced against the survival of Westeros itself. Catelyn steps forward, her political instincts taking control. "Where does he propose this meeting?" "The inn at the crossroads, my lady. Neutral ground, under the protection of guest right." Grey Wind raises his head and growls softly, as if sensing his master's internal turmoil. Robb reaches down to stroke the direwolf's fur, drawing comfort from the simple loyalty of an animal that knows nothing of politics or compromise. "I need time to consider," he says finally. "Of course, Your Grace. Lord Tywin can wait 1 day for your answer. But the Dothraki advance every hour, and delay serves neither of our causes." After the Lannister envoys withdraw, the tent falls silent, except for the sound of wind through canvas. Robb stares at the maps spread before him, or seeing not the familiar geography of his homeland, but the future paths that stretch ahead, like branches of a great tree. "If I meet with Tywin Lannister, I betray everything Father died for," he says quietly. "If you don't," Catelyn replies, "everything Father lived for dies with us." The choice tears at him like claws. Honor versus survival. Justice versus necessity. The lessons of his father against the harsh realities of kingship. "Send word to Lord Tywin," Robb says at last, his voice carrying the weight of a crown he never wanted to wear. "I will meet with him at the crossroads, under guest right, with a small retinue." Lord Karstark's face goes white with shock and rage. "Your Grace, you cannot mean this. We swore an oath to avenge Lord Ned." "I swore an oath to protect the North," Robb replies, his young voice carrying new authority. "Sometimes protecting requires choices that honor would reject. This is one of those times." The decision spreads through the camp like wildfire. Some men nod with grim understanding. They see the necessity, even if they hate it. Others mutter of betrayal and broken vows. But all recognize that their boy king has just stepped fully into the crown his father's death placed on his head. In the distance, smoke rises from burning villages as the Dothraki advance continues. Time runs out for the divided kingdoms of Westeros. Either they unite against the foreign threat, or they fall separately to an enemy unlike any they have ever faced. The wolf must treat with the lion, or both will feed the horses of the Dragon Queen. The great hall of Harrenhal echoes with voices speaking a dozen different tongues. Ravens come and go like dark messengers of fate, carrying words across a kingdom that trembles at the edge of transformation. Daenerys sits upon a throne hastily carved from Harrenhal's ancient weirwood, baby Rhaego sleeping in her arms, while scribes and envoys cluster around tables covered in maps and correspondence. "Lord Celtigar has bent the knee," reports Jorah Mormont, reading from a scroll bearing a red crab seal. "He brings his house's allegiance and offers the use of Claw Isle as a naval base for our fleet." Daenerys nods with satisfaction. Each lord who submits freely spares her the necessity of conquest. though such victories come slowly. For every house that bends the knee, 2 more declare for her enemies, or simply flee rather than choose sides in a war that defies all precedent. "And Lord Massey's response?" she asks. Jorah's expression darkens, refuses all terms, says he'll die before kneeling to foreign savages and their dragon whore. The words sting, though Daenerys has grown accustomed to such insults. Fear breeds hatred, and her arrival with 100,000 Dothraki warriors has given Westeros plenty of reason for fear. Still, she persists in offering mercy to those who submit. A queen rules through consent as much as conquest, whatever her husband's blood riders might believe. "Send another envoy to Lord Massey," she commands. "Tell him I offer one final chance to bend the knee. After that, his lands burn." Across the hall, Drogo sits with his Khals around a low table, their harsh laughter mixing with the clatter of gaming pieces. They play a Dothraki war game with carved horses and warriors, but their eyes frequently drift toward their Khaleesi and her endless negotiations. The patience required for such diplomacy sits poorly with men bred for swift action and decisive violence. "Too many words," growls Kotho in Dothraki, loud enough for Daenerys to hear. A Khal takes what he wants with steel, not with ravens. Kaholo nods agreement, his scarred face showing the frustration shared by many blood riders. The stone tents of King's Landing wait 3 days' ride to the south. Why do we sit here playing with scrolls when we could be drinking from the skulls of our enemies? Drogo's dark eyes find his wife across the hall, and she recognizes the conflict there. He loves her, respects her wisdom, but his nature demands action. The Dothraki way knows no patience, no compromise, no mercy for the weak. But every day spent in negotiation feels like cowardice to men raised on the endless grasslands. "Moon of my life grows soft with foreign ways," mutters Hago, the youngest of Drogo's blood riders. She forgets that strength alone commands respect. The comment carries clearly across the stone floor, and Daenerys feels the weight of watching eyes. Her authority among the Dothraki depends entirely on Drogo's support, but even that grows strained as cultural differences widen the gap between husband and wife. Jorah steps closer to her throne, his voice dropping to a whisper only she can hear. "My queen, perhaps we should consider a more direct approach. The blood riders grow restless, and restless Dothraki are dangerous Dothraki." "I will not become a simple conqueror," Daenerys replies quietly. "If I'm to rule these lands, I need the people's acceptance, not just their fear." "Fear often leads to acceptance, given time," Jorah points out, with the pragmatism of long experience. "And time is what we may not have. Intelligence suggests the Stark and Lannister armies are moving toward some kind of accord." The news hits Daenerys like cold water. For days, ravens have brought word of the chaos consuming the 7 kingdoms. 5 kings claiming the throne, armies bleeding each other white in civil war. She had counted on that division to ease her own conquest. But if her enemies unite against the foreign threat... "How certain is this intelligence?" she asks. "Multiple sources confirm it," Jorah replies. "Robb Stark has agreed to meet with Tywin Lannister under guest right. As the Northern King faces the same choice we all do, unite against the greater threat or fall separately to it." Daenerys shifts Rhaego to her other arm, her mind working through the implications. United, the armies of the North and Westerlands could field perhaps 50,000 men, still outnumbered, but professional soldiers fighting on familiar ground with the advantage of defensive positions. "My sun and stars," she calls out in Dothraki, rising from her makeshift throne. "A word in private?" Drogo disentangles himself from the war game and follows her to an alcove where they can speak without an audience. The privacy feels strained. In Dothraki culture, a Khal's decisions are made in the open, witnessed by his followers. But Daenerys has learned to navigate between 2 worlds, adapting her methods to circumstances. "The wolf and lion may join against us," she says in his native tongue. "We must move faster. Strike before they can coordinate their defense." Drogo's face shows relief at her words. For weeks, he has chafed against her diplomatic approach, wanting to unleash his warriors on the rich lands that spread before them like a feast. Now his Khaleesi speaks his language, the language of war. "Good," he replies, his hand dropping to his arak. "My blood riders speak truth. Too many words, not enough blood. We ride south and take the Iron Chair before the moon turns." "But carefully," Daenerys cautions. "We cannot simply burn our way to the throne. I need subjects to rule, not ashes to govern." The distinction matters more to her than to him. Drogo sees conquest as an end in itself. Take what you can, enjoy what you take, but leave the complexities to others. But Daenerys understands that ruling requires different skills than conquering, and those skills demand a population that sees her as legitimate. "The strong rule, the weak serve," Drogo says with characteristic simplicity. "This is the way of the world. In Westeros, the way is different," she argues. "Lords must choose their allegiance, force them all into submission, and the realm bleeds forever." Their conversation is interrupted by a commotion from the main hall. A new messenger has arrived, this one bearing the colors of House Velaryon. The man looks exhausted from hard riding, his clothes dusty, and his horse lathered with sweat from urgent travel. "Your Grace," the messenger says, dropping to one knee before Daenerys. "Lord Montford Velaryon sends word from Driftmark. His fleets are yours to command, and he offers safe harbor for any ships you might need." Another lord bends the knee, bringing with him the sea power that could prove crucial in the campaigns to come. Daenerys feels a moment of vindication. Her diplomatic approach bears fruit, even if slowly. But Kotho spits in disgust at the display. "More words," he growls. "This lord offers ships we do not need to sail seas we have already crossed. What use is such a man?" "Every ally matters," Daenerys replies firmly. "Every lord who submits willingly spares us a battle we might otherwise fight." "Battles are why we came," Kaholo points out. "My Arak thirsts for blood, not for the tears of surrendering lords." The tension in the hall grows thick enough to cut. Daenerys realizes she stands at a crossroads that will define both her reign and her marriage. Pushed too hard for diplomacy, and she loses the Dothraki warriors who put her on any throne she might claim. Embrace pure conquest, and she becomes the foreign tyrant her enemies paint her as. Jorah approaches with another scroll, his timing either fortunate or deliberately calculated to break the mounting confrontation. "Intelligence from our spies in King's Landing," he reports. "King Joffrey has recalled several thousand men from the Riverlands. They're strengthening the city's defenses and hiring sellsword companies from across the narrow sea." "Fear," Drogo says with satisfaction. "The boy king shits himself at word of our coming." "Fear and preparation," Daenerys corrects. "They know we're coming, and they're ready for us. Every day we delay gives them more time to prepare." She looks around the hall at the assembled Dothraki leaders, reading the mood in their faces. Frustration wars with loyalty, impatience with respect for her position. These men followed Drogo across the poisoned water because they believed in his strength and her destiny. But belief requires validation through action. "Send final terms to all lords within 50 leagues, she commands, her voice carrying new authority. "They have 3 days to bend the knee or face the consequences. After that, we ride for King's Landing with fire and blood." The Blood Riders exchange glances of approval. At last, their Khaleesi speaks like a true conqueror. The time for words draws to a close, and the time for steel approaches. "And the lords who refuse?" asks Jorah. Daenerys looks down at baby Rhaego, sleeping peacefully despite the momentous decisions being made around him. The stallion who mounts the world will inherit whatever kingdom she can carve from the ruins of the old. If that requires terrible choices, so be it. Those who refuse face the Dothraki Sea in all its fury, she says quietly. They will learn why the Horse Lords are feared from Qarth to Volantis. Drogo's smile shows teeth white as bone in his bronze face. His Khaleesi has finally embraced the truth he learned long ago. Power grows from strength, not from the permission of the weak. Now you sound like a queen, he says with fierce pride. The dragon awakens at last. Outside Harrenhal's walls, 100,000 Dothraki warriors tend their weapons and prepare for the greatest battle their people have ever fought. The conquest of Westeros enters its final phase, and the Seven Kingdoms tremble on the edge of transformation. Fire and blood approach King's Landing, carried on the hoofbeats of destiny itself. The morning sun rises over King's Landing to reveal a sight that no living man has witnessed. The greatest city in Westeros surrounded by an ocean of horses and steel. From the Red Keep's highest tower to the humblest tavern in Flea Bottom, 1 million souls wake to find their world transformed overnight. The Dothraki Sea has come to the capital of the Seven Kingdoms, and it stretches beyond the horizon in every direction. Tyrion Lannister stands atop the walls of the Red Keep, his mismatched eyes taking in the magnitude of the force arrayed against them. Even his cynical mind, accustomed to the worst humanity can offer, struggles to comprehend what he sees. 100,000 mounted warriors circle the city like wolves around a wounded stag, their war cries echoing off the stone walls in waves of sound that seem to shake the very foundations. "How many do you count?" he asks Sir Jacelyn Bywater, the commander of the City Watch. "Impossible to say, my lord," Bywater replies, his weathered face pale with the strain of sleepless nights. "They move constantly, never holding formation long enough to get an accurate tally. But more than we've ever faced. More than anyone has ever faced." Tyrion nods grimly. 3 days ago, he had commanded 20,000 men. City Watch, palace guards, hastily recruited sellswords from across the narrow sea. Now, after desertions and defections, perhaps half that number remain, but against a force that might as well be infinite. "The wildfire?" he inquires. "Ready, my lord, stored beneath the Sept of Baelor, and at key points along the walls. If they breach the gates—" Bywater trails off, unwilling to speak the words that hang between them. If the Dothraki breach the gates, wildfire becomes the only option left, a final, desperate gamble that might destroy attacker and defender alike. In the throne room below, King Joffrey holds court with all the petulant authority his 13 years can muster. But his pale hands shake as he grips the arms of the Iron Throne, and his voice cracks when he speaks. The boy who ordered Ned Stark's execution now faces his own mortality, and the prospect terrifies him. "Why aren't they attacking?" he demands, his question directed at anyone who might provide an answer that doesn't involve his own death. "Savages don't wait. They attack like mad dogs." "These aren't ordinary savages, Your Grace," Tyrion explains as he enters the hall. "They're led by someone who understands strategy. The longer they wait, the more our men desert and the more our people panic." "Then we attack them first," Joffrey snaps. "Send the knights out. Cut them down." Tyrion almost laughs at the suggestion. Send a few hundred heavy cavalry against 100,000 horse archers? It would be suicide, and glorious suicide serves no one's interests. "Your Grace, perhaps we might consider negotiation." "Negotiation?" Joffrey's voice rises to a shriek. "I am the rightful king. I don't negotiate with foreign whores and their barbarian lovers." Across the throne room, what Queen Cersei watches her sons display with growing horror. Not horror at his words, but at what those words might cost them. She has spent years protecting Joffrey from the consequences of his cruelty, but some consequences cannot be averted through political maneuvering. "My son," she says carefully, "Lord Tyrion may speak wisdom. If terms can be reached—" "No terms," Joffrey screams. "We fight to the last man. That's what kings do." Outside the city walls, that last man calculation grows grimmer by the hour. Khal Drogo rides his black stallion along the Dothraki lines, inspecting his forces with the eye of a commander who has never known defeat. His khals follow behind him, their faces painted for war, their ararks sharp as razors and twice as eager for blood. "The stone tent has many mouths," observes Kotho, gesturing toward the various gates that pierce King's Landing's walls. "We cannot watch them all." "We don't need to watch them all," Drogo replies in harsh Dothraki. "We need only to break one. Fear will do the rest." He signals to his blood riders, and war horns begin to sound across the vast encampment. The time for waiting ends. The time for conquest begins. The first assault comes from the east, where the Dothraki have dragged massive logs from the Kingswood to serve as battering rams. Thousands of riders dismount and charge toward the King's Gate on foot, their curved swords catching sunlight like scales on some vast serpent. The sight freezes defenders on the walls, horse lords fighting, as infantry defies everything they thought they knew about Dothraki warfare. Tyrion watches from the battlements as arrows darken the sky above the charging warriors. The City Watch's crossbowmen find their marks, and Dothraki fall by the dozens. But dozens mean nothing when thousands press forward, and the first battering ram reaches the gate with a crash that shakes the entire wall. "Wildfire!" Tyrion shouts. "Now!" Green flames erupt from hidden chambers beneath the gate, consuming attackers and defenders alike in an inferno that burns hotter than any natural fire. The screams carry across the entire city, and for a moment, the Dothraki assault wavers. But only for a moment. While the eastern attack draws defenders, Drogo himself leads the true assault against the river gate to the north, or his personal guard, the finest warriors of the greatest Khalasar in Dothraki history, strikes the lightly defended entrance like a thunderbolt. These are not foot soldiers with makeshift rams, but mounted warriors moving at full gallop with steel and fury. The gate splinters on the first impact. Sandor Clegane, the Hound, stands in the breach with his massive sword drawn, his burned face showing no fear as death approaches on horseback. For years he has served kings he despises, protected princes who disgust him, fought for causes that mean nothing. Now, finally, he faces an enemy worth fighting. "Come on then," he roars at the approaching Dothraki. "Come and die!" The first riders to reach him learn why men call him the Hound. His sword takes heads and limbs with equal ease, and for precious minutes he holds the breach alone. But courage cannot stand against overwhelming numbers forever. When Drogo's arak finally finds its mark, the Hound falls with a smile on his ruined lips. The river gate explodes open like a dam bursting, and the Dothraki sea pours into King's Landing. What follows defies description. The sack of King's Landing becomes a byword for devastation that will echo through history for 1,000 years. Streets that once rang with merchants' calls now echo with screams and the thunder of hoofbeats. Houses that stood for centuries burn like kindling. The smell of smoke and blood hangs over the city like a pall. In the Red Keep's throne room, Joffrey finally understands the reality of his situation. The sounds of battle grow closer with each passing minute, and the King's Guard, who should protect him, look toward the exits with increasing frequency. "We must flee," Cersei says urgently, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "Gather what gold we can carry and run for the harbor. There may still be ships." "I won't run!" Joffrey shrieks. "I'm the king! The rightful king!" But even as he speaks, his feet carry him toward the throne room's rear exit. Whatever else he may be, Joffrey Baratheon is no fool when it comes to self-preservation. The royal family's flight through the Red Keep becomes a desperate race against the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Down corridors that once housed the most powerful court in the world, past empty chambers where lords and ladies have already fled or hidden, toward stables where a handful of horses wait for riders who may never reach them. They almost make it. The courtyard erupts in chaos as Dothraki warriors pour through gates that no longer hold them back. Joffrey stumbles as he runs, his royal robes tangling around his legs, his crown falling from his head to roll across blood-stained stones. Drogo finds him there, the boy king on his knees in the mud, weeping and begging for mercy from men who speak no common tongue. The great Khal dismounts slowly, his dark eyes taking in the pitiful sight of Westerosi royalty brought low. "You are the king?" he asks in his heavily accented common tongue. Yes, I am," Joffrey sobs, hope flaring in his eyes. Perhaps this savage might ransom him, might value a king's life above simple slaughter. "I can give you gold, lands, anything you want." Drogo considers this for a moment, then draws his arak. "I am Drogo, Khal of Khals," he says simply. "I take what I want." The blade falls with finality that ends the Baratheon claim to the Iron Throne forever. Cersei watches her son's death with eyes gone empty of everything except despair. The Golden Queen, who once commanded the loyalty of kingdoms, now kneels in a stable courtyard, covered in mud and ashes, waiting for whatever fate the conquerors choose to give her. But Drogo's attention has already moved beyond the dead boy king. He climbs the steps of the Red Keep with purpose, his blood riders following behind him like an honor guard of death. The throne room awaits, and with it, the Iron Throne itself, the seat of power that has commanded Westeros for 3 centuries. Daenerys arrives as the last defenders surrender, baby Rhaego sleeping peacefully in her arms despite the devastation surrounding them. She picks her way carefully through the rubble and bodies that litter the throne room, her violet eyes taking in the twisted metal monstrosity that her ancestors created from the swords of their enemies. Drogo stands before the Iron Throne, his arak still bloody from the day's work. Around them, Dothraki warriors cheer their victory, while captive nobles kneel in the wreckage of their former power. "It is yours, moon of my life," Drogo says in Dothraki, gesturing toward the throne. "Take what your blood has always owned." Daenerys approaches the Iron Throne slowly, feeling the weight of history and prophecy settling around her shoulders like a cloak. 300 years after Aegon the Conqueror, a Targaryen sits the Iron Throne again. But not as she imagined, not through politics or marriage or careful alliances, but through fire and blood and the might of foreign warriors. She settles onto the twisted metal seat, feeling its sharp edges press against her skin, as if reminding her of the price of power. In her arms, baby Rhaego stirs and opens his violet eyes, gazing up at the throne room that will be his inheritance. "Long live the Queen," someone calls out, whether Dothraki or Westerosi. It's impossible to tell. The cry spreads through the throne room and beyond, carried by voices speaking a dozen different languages. King's Landing burns around them, but from those ashes rises something new. The reign of the Dragon Queen, backed by the strength of the Dothraki Sea. The conquest is complete. Now comes the harder task of ruling what fire and blood have won. The great Sept of Baelor has never witnessed a coronation like this one, where once the faith of the 7 blessed Targaryen kings with holy oils and ancient rituals, now Dothraki shamans chant in their harsh tongue, while burning mare's blood in braziers that fill the sacred space with alien smoke. The High Septon lies dead in the Sept's ruins, killed defending his faith against foreign gods, and no replacement dares step forward to crown a queen who commands horse lords. Daenerys sits upon a portable throne carved from dragon bone. Baby Rhaego, sleeping in her arms as Dothraki calls, place a crown of Valyrian steel upon her silver hair. The crown itself tells a story, melted down from the swords of dead Lannister guards, its metal still bearing traces of blood that no amount of polish can remove. Around her, the surviving nobles of King's Landing kneel in terrified silence, their fine clothes torn and stained with ash. Rise, Queen Daenerys of House Targaryen, first of her name, Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lady of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm, Jorah Mormont announces in common tongue, his voice echoing off broken stone. The titles sound hollow in the devastated sept, like words spoken over a grave. The celebration that follows resembles no royal feast Westeros has ever seen. Dothraki warriors roast whole horses over fires built from priceless furniture, their laughter mixing with the distant sound of screaming from the lower city. The sack of King's Landing continues into its third day, and discipline grows thin among riders drunk on conquest and plunder. "How many have bent the knee?" Daenerys asks Jorah as they retreat to a quieter chamber in the Red Keep. The Hand's tower has been cleared of bodies and hastily converted into a throne room more suited to their needs than the iron monstrosity in the main hall. 17 lords so far, Jorah reports, consulting a list written in multiple hands. Minor houses mostly, men who value survival over pride. But the great lords... He shakes his head grimly. Lord Redwine has fled to the Reach. Lord Rowan barricaded himself in Golden Grove, and we've had no word from Dorne at all. Drogo enters the chamber with 3 of his calls, their araks still bloody from the day's executions. The great call moves differently now, not with the easy confidence of the grasslands, but with the frustrated energy of a predator caged in stone walls. The Red Keep chafes against his nature like an ill-fitting harness. "Wast more talking," he says in heavily accented common tongue, his displeasure evident. "Always more talking. Why do we not simply ride to these stone tents and take what we need?" "Because ruling requires more than taking," Daenerys replies patiently, though the strain shows in her voice. This conversation has repeated daily since the conquest, and neither spouse seems willing to yield. We need the Lord's cooperation to govern effectively. The strong rule, the weak serve, Drogo counters with characteristic bluntness. This is the way of things. In Westeros, the way is different. Westeros is ours now, Kotho interrupts, his scarred face showing contempt for Westerosi customs. Why should we follow the ways of the defeated? The question hangs in the air like incense, too heavy with implications that extend far beyond this single conversation. In the week since the conquest, the same conflict has emerged repeatedly, Dothraki directness clashing against Westerosi complexity, horse lord simplicity grinding against feudal intricacy. Because defeated does not mean destroyed, Jorah answers carefully. Your Grace, we rule perhaps 1 million people in King's Landing alone. Across the 7 kingdoms, tens of millions look to the Iron Throne for leadership. They cannot all be governed by the sword. Why not? Kaholo demands. Fear keeps men obedient better than love. Fear also breeds rebellion, Daenerys points out, and rebels are harder to rule than willing subjects. A commotion from the courtyard below interrupts their debate. Daenerys moves to the window and looks down to see a sight that turns her stomach. Another line of prisoners being led to the executioner's block. Nobles who refuse to bend the knee, merchants who tried to hide their gold, commoners who showed insufficient respect to their new masters. The killing continues without end, each death deepening the chasm between conqueror and conquered. How many today? She asks quietly. 47, Jorah replies, his voice carefully neutral. Mostly Lannister loyalists who thought their allegiance would protect them. Daenerys closes her eyes against the sight. Each execution serves a purpose, demonstrating the consequences of resistance, satisfying Dothraki demands for blood, clearing away the old order to make room for the new. But she cannot escape the feeling that every head that falls makes her task of ruling more difficult. And the economic situation? She asks, turning away from the window. Jorah's expression grows even grimmer. Catastrophic. The guilds have fled or gone into hiding. Trade has stopped entirely. The granaries burn while the Dothraki take what they need for their horses. Within a month, we'll face starvation. The warning carries special weight coming from a man who understands both Westerosi economics and Dothraki culture. Jorah has watched this exact scenario play out in Essos, where Dothraki raids leave devastation that takes generations to heal. But raiding and ruling demand different approaches. What do you suggest? Daenerys asks. immediate restoration of trade relationships, pardons for merchants who fled, or protection for the guilds, and, he hesitates, knowing his next words will anger the Khals. An end to the indiscriminate looting. Kotho's hand drops to his arak at the suggestion. You would steal from warriors the fruits of their victory. I would preserve those fruits for future harvest, Jorah replies carefully. Loot taken today feeds us for a week. Trade restored feeds us for years. The argument might have escalated, but a new messenger arrives with news that renders their debate moot. The man wears the colors of House Tyrell, though his fine clothes show signs of hard travel and fear. Your Grace, the messenger says, dropping to one knee with obvious reluctance. Lord Mace Tyrell sends word from Highgarden. He acknowledges your victory and requests terms for surrender. A moment of hope flickers in Daenerys' chest. The Reach commands the kingdom's largest population and richest farmlands. If House Tyrell submits, it could stabilize her rule and provide the resources needed for effective governance. What terms does he propose? She asks. Continuation of Tyrell lordship over the Reach in exchange for regular tribute, respect for local customs and religious practices, and the messenger swallows hard. Assurance that Dothraki forces will not be garrisoned permanently in Reach lands. The last condition strikes at the heart of their dilemma. How can foreign conquerors rule a native population without foreign troops to enforce their will? But how can they maintain a permanent occupation without becoming an army of conquest rather than a government of administration? Drogo's reaction is immediate and predictable. No terms. They submit completely or burn completely. My sun and stars, Daenerys says carefully. Perhaps we might consider. No! Drogo's voice cuts across hers like a blade. Weakness invites challenge. Give them terms today. Fight them again tomorrow. The messenger flinches at the harsh exchange, clearly recognizing that his life hangs on the outcome of this disagreement between king and queen. In the charged silence that follows, baby Rhaego begins to cry, a sound that seems to echo the growing discord in their conquered kingdom. We'll discuss this privately, Daenerys says finally, dismissing the messenger with instructions to wait for their answer. But the private discussion that follows only deepens the fundamental divide between husband and wife. Drogo sees submission or death as the only choices worth offering, as Daenerys understands that ruling requires compromise, negotiation, the delicate balance between strength and mercy that keeps kingdoms stable. You grow soft with stone walls and iron chairs, Drogo says bluntly. The Grass Sea teaches truth. The strong take, the weak serve, the foolish die. This is the only law that matters. The Grass Sea has no cities, Daenerys counters. No trade, no learning, no growth beyond what one man can take with his sword. I want more for our son than endless raiding. She looks down at baby Rhaego, now sleeping peacefully despite the tension around him. The stallion who mounts the world deserves better than an empire built on ashes and maintained by fear. What will you tell Lord Tyrell? Jorah asks when the couple's argument reaches its familiar stalemate. Daenerys considers her options carefully, or accept the terms, and she appears weak to the Dothraki. Reject them, and she loses the chance for a peaceful resolution that could stabilize half the kingdom. Rule by fear, and every sunrise brings new rebellion. Rule by compromise, and every compromise becomes a precedent for future challenges. Tell him we'll consider his proposal, she says finally, but make it clear that consideration is not acceptance. We need time to establish proper governance before making such commitments. Jorah nods understanding. The answer satisfies no one completely, which makes it perfectly suited to their impossible situation. Meanwhile, in chambers throughout the Red Keep, displaced nobles whisper of resistance and revenge. The swift conquest has left many alive who remember the old ways, and living memory proves more dangerous than any army when it comes to breeding discontent. In Dawn, Prince Oberyn Martell receives reports of the conquest with cold calculation. The Red Viper has no love for the Lannisters, but foreign occupation threatens Dornish independence even more than Lannister rule ever did. "How many spears can we raise?" he asks his brother Prince Doran. 20,000, perhaps 25, Doran replies from his wheelchair, his gouty legs covered by silk blankets. But can Dorne stand alone against such numbers? Dorne has stood alone before, Oberyn points out. These horse lords may conquer castles, but they've never fought in the desert. Sand and sun will be our allies. Similar conversations echo across the Seven Kingdoms as the reality of foreign rule settles over Westeros like a shroud. The conquest is complete, but the real war, the war for the hearts and minds of the people, has only just begun. In her chambers that night, Daenerys rocks Rhaego to sleep while contemplating the magnitude of her inheritance. She has won the Iron Throne her family built, but keeping it may prove harder than taking it ever was. Every decision creates new enemies. Every compromise shows weakness. Every act of strength breeds resentment. The dragons have returned to Westeros, but ruling with fire and blood proves more complex than conquest ever suggested. The real test of her reign lies not in the battles already won, but in the peace she must somehow forge from the ashes of victory. The great hall of Winterfell echoes with whispered conversations that would mean death if overheard by the wrong ears. Lady Sansa Stark sits in her father's chair, no longer the innocent girl who once dreamed of southern knights and royal courts. The months since the Dothraki conquest have aged her beyond her years, turning childish dreams into steel-hard determination. "How many can we trust?" she asks Maester Luwin, her voice carrying an authority that would have seemed impossible in the girl who once embroidered flowers and sang sweet songs. The old Maester consults notes, written in a cipher of his own devising. "Perhaps 3,000 men from the mountain clans. Lord Manderley promises another 1,000 if we can guarantee ships for evacuation." The Umbers remain uncommitted. They fear reprisals against their families held hostage in King's Landing. Sansa nods grimly. At every northern house faces the same terrible calculation: resist the foreign occupation and risk the lives of loved ones caught in the Dragon Queen's web. The Dothraki may not understand the subtleties of Westerosi politics, but they grasp the simple mathematics of terror. "And word from the other kingdoms?" she inquires. Dorne mobilizes openly now. Prince Oberyn has called all banners and declared the foreign queen an enemy of the realm. The Reach remains neutral, but Lord Tyrell's submission grows more reluctant each day. Luwin's weathered face shows the strain of months spent coordinating a resistance that dares not speak its name. "The situation deteriorates everywhere, my lady. The realm bleeds under foreign rule." The bleeding is literal as well as figurative. Reports arrive daily of villages burned for insufficient tribute, ours of lords executed for imagined slights, of common folk enslaved for the crime of existing in the path of Dothraki raiders. The conquest has become an occupation, and the occupation grows more brutal with each passing day. In King's Landing, that brutality manifests in ways that would have been unthinkable under the old regime. The great markets of the capital now host slave auctions, where Westerosi citizens are sold like cattle to the highest bidders. Dothraki carls bid on craftsmen and farmers, while their wives examine household servants like livestock at market. Daenerys watches one such auction from the shadows of a covered walkway, baby Rhaego sleeping in her arms despite the horror unfolding below. The sight turns her stomach, but she finds herself paralyzed by the contradiction between her ideals and the reality of her rule. "This must stop," she whispers to Jorah Mormont, who stands beside her, with his face carefully neutral. "Your Grace," Jorah replies quietly. "The Khals consider it their right. Spoils of conquest by Dothraki law. If you forbid it, they may question your authority." "Let them question," Daenerys says, with more conviction than she feels. "I will not rule over a kingdom built on slavery." But even as she speaks the words, she knows the complexity runs deeper than simple prohibition. The Dothraki economy depends on slaves and plunder. Take away their traditional rewards, and what reason do they have to remain loyal to her cause? The contradiction tears at her daily, made worse by Drogo's dismissive attitude toward her concerns. When she raises the issue that evening in their private chambers, his response proves as predictable as it is frustrating. "Weak words from stone tents make weak people," he says in his heavily accented common tongue. "The strong take what they need, the weak serve as they must. This is the way of the world." "It's the way of the grasslands," Daenerys counters. "But we don't rule grasslands anymore. We rule cities, farms, people who remember what it was to be free." Drogo's dark eyes flash with impatience. "They are free to serve us well or serve us poorly. The choice is theirs." "That's not freedom. That is strength." Drogo's voice rises enough to make baby Rhaego stir restlessly. "You grow soft with too much thinking. The Dragon Queen who burned King's Landing now worries about the feelings of defeated enemies?" The accusation stings because it contains a grain of truth. Or Daenerys has changed since the conquest, but not in the way Drogo suggests. She has grown harder in some ways, softer in others, more willing to make difficult choices, but less willing to ignore their consequences. Their argument is interrupted by urgent knocking at the chamber door. Ser Jorah enters with news that drains the colour from Daenerys' face. "Your Grace, there's been an incident in the Sept of Remembrance. A group calling itself the Faith Militant attacked a Dothraki patrol. 7 warriors dead, including Khal Ralco's youngest son." Daenerys closes her eyes against the implications. Religious resistance represents the most dangerous kind of opposition. Fanatics who fear their gods more than earthly punishment cannot be controlled through normal threats. "How many attackers?" Drogo asks, his hand dropping instinctively to his arak. "Perhaps 20, Jorah reports, armed with crude weapons but fighting with the fervor of true believers. They carved 7 pointed stars into the foreheads of the dead." Drogo's face darkens with the promise of violence. "Find them. Kill them. Burn their holy places, until none dare raise hands against us." "My sun and stars," Daenerys says carefully. Perhaps a more measured response. "No!" Drogo's voice cuts across hers like a blade. Weakness invites more challenge. These stone worshippers must learn the price of defiance. But measured response becomes impossible when the Faith Militant strikes again the next night, and again the night after that. Each attack grows bolder. Each victory over Dothraki patrols inspires more recruits to their holy cause. The Sept of Baelor becomes a fortress where armed Septons preach revolution against the heathen conquerors. Meanwhile, in the Red Keep's throne room, Daenerys holds court with increasing difficulty. The Iron Throne cuts into her back as she listens to reports that grow worse each day. Famine spreads across the riverlands as Dothraki horses consume crops meant to feed the realm. Trade has collapsed entirely, leaving cities dependent on whatever supplies the conquerors choose to provide. "The situation in Lannisport approaches catastrophe," reports a trembling merchant who somehow maintained his position after the conquest. "The harbour sits empty, the guilds have fled, and the people eat grass to fill their bellies." "What do they need?" Daenerys asks, though she suspects the answer will prove as impossible as all the others. "Food, Your Grace. Ships to restore trade, protection from raiders who take what little remains." The merchant's voice drops to a whisper. "They need hope that tomorrow will be better than today. Hope, the one thing Daenerys cannot provide through conquest or intimidation. She can execute rebels, burn resistance strongholds, and threaten dire consequences for disobedience. But she cannot make her subjects love their chains, no matter how golden she tries to make them." That night, as she prepares for bed in chambers that feel more like a prison with each passing day, Daenerys makes a decision that will echo through the rest of her reign. She sends secret messages to loyal supporters in major cities, authorizing the release of slaves and the restoration of local customs in exchange for genuine submission. The decision nearly costs her life. No, the assassin strikes 3 days later, during a public audience in the throne room. A minor lord from the Westerlands, supposedly bringing tribute and pledges of loyalty, instead produces a poisoned blade from beneath his cloak. Only Jorah's quick reflexes save the Dragon Queen's life, though the knight takes a wound that will scar him permanently. "Who sent you?" Daenerys demands, as the would-be killer lies bleeding on the throne room floor. "The true king," the man gasps. "Stannis, Baratheon?" The realm remembers what was taken. He dies before revealing more, but the message rings clear enough. Somewhere beyond her reach, her enemies organize and plan and prepare for the day when Dragonfire cannot protect the foreign queen and her barbarian husband. That night, Drogo's response proves as excessive as Daenerys feared. Our 3 noble houses suspected of harboring similar sentiments find their keeps burned and their members put to the sword. The executions continue for days, each death meant to serve as a lesson to others who might consider resistance. "This solves nothing," Daenerys tells him, after watching smoke rise from Casterly Rock itself, put to flame in retaliation for the Westerlands Lord's assassination attempt. "Every man you kill has sons and brothers who will remember what you've done." "Good," Drogo replies with grim satisfaction. "Let them remember and fear to follow their kinsman's path." But fear and respect are not the same thing, as Jorah points out during one of their increasingly frequent private councils. The old knight's wounded arm hangs in a sling, a constant reminder of how close they came to losing everything. "Your Grace," he says carefully, "we cannot rule through terror alone. Even Aegon the Conqueror won hearts as well as battles. The realm must see benefit from your rule, not just punishment for resistance." "What do you suggest?" Daenerys asks, though she suspects she knows the answer. "Compromise. Reduce the tribute demands. End the slave markets. Allow local lords more autonomy in exchange for genuine loyalty." Jorah's voice carries the weight of hard experience. Give them something to fight for, instead of only something to fight against. The advice makes sense, but implementing it requires convincing her husband and his Khals that strength sometimes looks like mercy. That conversation goes as poorly as all the others, ending with Drogo storming from their chambers and Daenerys alone with her doubts. In Dawn, Prince Oberyn Martell receives reports of the growing chaos with cold satisfaction. Every Dothraki excess serves his cause. Every burned village drives more recruits to his banners. The Red Viper has waited years for revenge against those who destroyed his family. Now he sees opportunity in the foreign queen's struggles. "How many spears now?" he asks his brother Doran. 30,000 raised, another 10,000 promised, Doran replies from his wheelchair, his voice carrying uncharacteristic warmth. Even the most cautious houses see the necessity now. The realm demands unity against this threat. And our allies beyond Dawn? Growing daily. Sansa Stark commands respect in the north. The faith militant gains strength with each atrocity. Even lords who bent the knee publicly send secret assurances of support. Doran's gouty hands clench the arms of his chair. The foreign queen's reign creates the very resistance that will destroy it. The truth of that observation becomes clear with each passing day. In trying to rule through fear, Daenerys and Drogo have created something they never faced on the grasslands, an enemy that grows stronger, through oppression rather than weaker. The Dragon Queen who conquered the Seven Kingdoms may yet lose them to the very methods she used to win them. As winter approaches and the first snows dust the battlements of Winterfell, Sansa Stark prepares for a different kind of war. Not the swift conquest that brought dragons back to Westeros, but the slow, grinding resistance that will decide whether the realm belongs to its ancient bloodlines or to foreign invaders who understand only the language of fire and blood. The dragon's price grows higher with each passing day, and soon even Daenerys Targaryen may find it more than she is willing to pay. The field before Harrenhal stretches like a green sea under the morning sun. But today it will run red with the blood of two armies that cannot coexist. 40,000 rebels have gathered from across the Seven Kingdoms, northern spears standing beside Dornish cavalry, faith-militant warriors praying alongside mountain clansmen. They come from different lands, worship different gods, but share one purpose: to drive the foreign invaders back across the narrow sea. Khal Drogo surveys the enemy host from his black stallion, his dark eyes calculating odds with the instinct of a man who has never known defeat. Behind him, 60,000 Dothraki warriors wait in perfect silence, their horses stamping restlessly as they sense the violence to come. The great Khalasar has shrunk since the conquest. Some Khals returned to Essos with their followers, others died in the grinding occupation of hostile cities. But those who remain represent the finest warriors of the grasslands, tempered by months of Westerosi warfare. They learn to fight like men, Kotho observes, gesturing toward the rebel formations with grudging respect. No more running like rabbits when we charge. Drogo nods agreement. The enemy before him bears little resemblance to the panicked levies his warriors scattered during the conquest. These men have learned hard lessons in blood and steel, was adapting their tactics to counter Dothraki mobility. Hedge knights anchor infantry squares, while crossbowmen wait in reserve. It will not be the swift victory of old battles. "Where is their war chief?" Drogo asks in common tongue, his accent thick, but his meaning clear. Jorah Mormont points toward the enemy center, where banners bearing the sun and spear of House Martell fly beside the direwolf of House Stark. Prince Oberyn commands the Dornish cavalry. Lady Sansa coordinates the northern forces, but they fight as equals. No single commander controls the whole army. "Good," Drogo says with fierce satisfaction. "Divided leadership means confused orders. We strike the center and split them apart." The plan holds merit, but Jorah's weathered face shows concern. "My king, perhaps we should consider offering terms. These are not raiders or sellswords. They fight for their homeland. Defeated enemies can become loyal subjects if shown mercy." Drogo's laugh carries no humor. "Mercy is for the weak. Today we end this rebellion with steel and fire. Let the survivors remember the price of defying the Dragon Queen." The battle begins with arrows darkening the sky like clouds of locusts. Dothraki horse archers loose shaft after shaft into the rebel formations, while staying beyond the range of crossbow bolts. Men fall by the hundreds in the first minutes, their screams lost in the thunder of hoofbeats and the clash of steel on steel. But the rebels hold their formations this time. Northern pike squares present walls of steel points that even Dothraki horses will not charge, while Dornish spearmen strike at riders who venture too close. The easy slaughter of earlier battles gives way to bloody, grinding warfare that favors neither side. Daenerys watches from a hill behind the Dothraki lines, baby Rhaego sleeping in her arms, despite the violence below. The child has grown in the months since the conquest, his violet eyes bright with intelligence, even as his father's warriors spill blood in his name. The sight fills her with equal measures of pride and horror. Pride at the strength her family has recovered, horror at the price paid for that recovery. "It goes badly," she tells Jorah, her voice barely audible over the sounds of battle. "Not badly, but slowly," Jorah corrects. "The rebels cannot win, but they can make victory costly. Every man they kill weakens our ability to hold what we've taken." The truth of his words becomes clear as the morning wears on. Dothraki superiority in mobility means little when enemies refuse to break formation and run. The horse lords find themselves drawn into the kind of grinding melee that favors disciplined infantry over individual prowess. Bodies pile up on both sides, as the battle becomes a test of endurance rather than skill. Then, near midday, Drogo makes the decision that will define the battle's outcome. "Enough!" he roars in Dothraki, his voice carrying across the field of slaughter. "I end this myself." He spurs his stallion toward the enemy center, his arak raised high in challenge. Behind him ride his blood riders and chosen champions, the finest warriors of the Dothraki Sea, formed into a spear point aimed at the heart of the rebellion. The sight electrifies both armies. Dothraki warriors cheer their call's courage, while rebels prepare to meet the charge that could break them completely. In the enemy ranks, Prince Oberyn Martell sees opportunity in Drogo's advance. Kill the foreign king, and his army might collapse like a tent with broken poles. "With me!" Oberyn shouts to his household guard, his voice carrying the authority of a man born to command. "Today we end this foreign nightmare." The two forces meet in the center of the battlefield with a crash that seems to shake the earth itself. Steel rings against steel as the finest warriors of two continents test their strength against each other. Dothraki araks curve through the air like silver snakes, while Dornish spears thrust with precision, born of generations of warfare. Drogo and Oberyn find each other in the chaos as if drawn by destiny itself. The great Khal towers over the Dornish prince, his massive frame scarred by countless battles, his arak thirsting for the blood of this latest challenger. Oberyn moves like water given form, his spear dancing through patterns that have made him legend throughout the Seven Kingdoms. "You fight well for a sand snake," Drogo says in common tongue, his blade barely deflecting a thrust that would have opened his throat. "You die badly for a horse lord," Oberyn replies, his spear point drawing a line of blood across Drogo's chest. The wound is shallow, but it marks the beginning of the end. The two warriors circle each other while their armies clash around them, each seeking the opening that will decide not just their personal duel, but the fate of kingdoms. To Drogo's strength battles Oberyn's speed in a contest that could have come from the songs of ancient heroes. The end comes suddenly and brutally. Oberyn's spear finds a gap in Drogo's defenses, punching through leather and muscle to pierce the great Khal's heart. But even as he dies, Drogo's arak completes its final swing, taking Oberyn's head from his shoulders in a spray of crimson that stains the grass for yards around. Both leaders fall within seconds of each other, their blood mingling in the earth they fought to rule. The sight freezes both armies in shocked silence. The rebellion's greatest champion and the conqueror's mightiest warrior, dead by each other's hands. Daenerys arrives at Drogo's side as his life ebbs away in great gouts of blood. The spear has done its work too well. No healing can undo the damage to his heart. She cradles his head in her lap, while baby Rhaego looks down, with eyes too young to understand the magnitude of what unfolds around them. "My sun and stars," she whispers in Dothraki, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Moon of my life," he gasps, his voice already growing weak. "The boy, he is Khal now. Teach him to be strong." Drogo's eyes find Rhaego's violet gaze and hold it for a moment that seems to last forever. Then the great Khal's breathing stops, and the man who crossed the narrow sea to reclaim a throne for dragons passes into legend. The silence that follows his death carries weight that presses down on every warrior present. Dothraki culture demands that a Khal's death be followed by the naming of his successor. But Rhaego is barely old enough to walk, much less lead a Khalasar, because the leadership vacuum opens like a wound that threatens to bleed the army to death. Kotho approaches the grieving queen with his blood riders behind him, their faces showing the confusion of men whose world has suddenly lost its foundation. "Khaleesi," he says carefully. "The boy is too young. Who leads the Khalasar now?" The question hangs in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. By Dothraki law, the strongest warrior should claim leadership until Rhaego comes of age. But which warrior? And would the others accept his authority? Already Daenerys can see Khals eyeing each other with calculation, measuring strength and loyalty in preparation for the conflicts to come. "I lead," she says quietly, rising to her feet with Rhaego still in her arms. "You are Khaleesi, not Khal," Hago points out, with the bluntness of Dothraki culture. "Thus a woman cannot lead warriors in battle." "A woman can lead if she has dragons," Daenerys replies, though no dragons have been seen in Westeros for generations. "And I am not just a woman. I am Queen of the Seven Kingdoms by right of conquest." The distinction matters more than it might seem. As Khaleesi, Daenerys rules only through her husband's strength, and only for as long as that strength endures. As queen, she claims authority in her own right, backed by law and legitimacy that transcends individual prowess. But legitimacy means little to warriors raised on the endless grasslands. Several calls exchange glances that speak of private conferences and alternative plans. Without Drogo's overwhelming presence to unite them, the great Khalasar shows signs of fracturing into its component parts. "The grasslands call," Kaholo says bluntly. "Many Khals speak of returning to the sacred places, to the Dothraki Sea, where horses run free." "Let them go," Daenerys surprises them by saying. "Any who wish to leave may do so with honor. But those who stay fight for something greater than plunder. They fight to build an empire that will last beyond any single Khal's lifetime." The challenge draws some warriors to her banner while driving others away. Over the following days, nearly half the Dothraki depart for the coast, and ships that will carry them back to Essos. They take their horses and weapons, but leave behind something harder to measure: the unity that made them unstoppable. Those who remain find themselves serving a very different kind of leader, and Daenerys begins implementing changes that would have been unthinkable under Drogo's rule. She forbids the taking of slaves, establishes courts to hear grievances, and offers pardons to rebels who lay down their arms. The policies horrify traditional Dothraki, while offering hope to war-weary Westerosi. "You cannot rule Dothraki with Westerosi laws," Kotho warns during one of their heated councils. "Warriors need blood and gold, not words and mercy." "Then they can follow their khals back to the grasslands," Daenerys replies with steel in her voice. "I rule the Seven Kingdoms now, not a raiding party. Those who stay must learn to live by the realm's laws." The transformation does not come easily or without cost. Many of her finest warriors abandon her cause for the familiar freedom of the Dothraki Sea. But those who remain begin the slow process of becoming something new. Not quite Dothraki, not quite Westerosi, but a synthesis that might yet heal the wounds carved by conquest. Standing in the ruins of Harrenhal where her reign began, Daenerys holds baby Rhaego close and contemplates the path that led her here. She came to Westeros as a Khaleesi, following her husband's dream of conquest. Now she remains as a queen, confronting the harder task of building something lasting from the ashes of victory. The stallion who mounts the world sleeps peacefully in her arms, innocent of the burden that will one day fall on his shoulders. Around them, a kingdom torn by war begins the first tentative steps toward healing, guided by a dragon queen who has learned that ruling requires wisdom as well as strength. The age of pure conquest has ended, or the age of building can begin. The throne room of the Red Keep bears little resemblance to the blood-soaked chamber where Joffrey once held court. Tapestries from Essos hang alongside Westerosi banners, while Dothraki araks rest in wall mounts beside traditional longswords. The Iron Throne itself has been softened with cushions and draped with silk, still imposing, but no longer the instrument of torture that previous kings endured as proof of their authority. Queen Daenerys sits upon the ancient seat, with 2-year-old Rhaego playing at her feet, his violet eyes bright with curiosity as he examines a wooden dragon that once belonged to King Aegon V. The child has grown strong and healthy in the months since his father's death, showing traits that mark him as heir to both conqueror and conquered. When he speaks, but it's in a mixture of Dothraki and common tongue, that would have been unthinkable before the conquest. "Your Grace," Jorah Mormont announces, as he enters the hall with a scroll bearing multiple seals. "The proclamation is ready for your signature." Daenerys takes the document and reads it one final time, though she knows every word by heart. The abolition of slavery throughout the Seven Kingdoms, the most sweeping legal reform in 3 centuries of Targaryen rule. The law will free thousands of people taken during the conquest, while establishing her reign as fundamentally different from the brutal occupation that preceded it. Lord Qyburn estimates the cost at nearly 1 million gold dragons in compensation to former owners, Jorah adds carefully. "The Treasury can bear it, but barely." "Let it bankrupt us if necessary," Daenerys replies, designing her name with firm strokes. "No throne built on slavery can stand forever. Better to begin our dynasty with clean hands." The irony of her words is not lost on either speaker. Her hands bear the blood of conquest, the ashes of burned cities, the weight of decisions that killed thousands. But clean is a relative term. Cleaner than before, perhaps, if not spotless in any absolute sense. A commotion from the throne room's entrance announces new arrivals. Lady Sansa Stark enters, flanked by northern guards, her auburn hair caught up in a style that emphasizes the steel in her blue eyes. The girl who once dreamed of knights and tourneys has become a woman hardened by war and loss. But there's something new in her bearing. Hope, perhaps, or at least the possibility of it. "Your Grace," Sansa says, but offering a curtsy calculated to show respect without submission. "I bring word from Winterfell regarding your proposal. The negotiations have taken months, conducted through intermediaries and carefully worded letters that dance around the central question: can the North accept Targaryen rule in exchange for unprecedented autonomy? The answer matters more than pride or protocol. Without Northern acceptance, Daenerys rules a fractured realm that will bleed itself to death in endless rebellion." "Speak freely, Lady Stark," Daenerys invites, gesturing for chairs to be brought. "We are not enemies here, whatever our past differences." Sansa takes the offered seat, but remains alert, like a wolf in unfamiliar territory. "The Northern Lords have agreed to acknowledge your rule under specific conditions. We keep our own laws, our own justice, our own gods. No Dothraki garrisons north of the Neck, and the North provides troops and taxes only by mutual agreement, not royal command. The terms amount to near independence, wrapped in the language of fealty. Any previous Targaryen monarch would have rejected such conditions as an insult to royal authority. But Daenerys has learned that authority without acceptance breeds only endless conflict." "And in return," she asks, "the North acknowledges House Targaryen's legitimate claim to the Iron Throne. We support your rule against external threats and provide mutual aid in times of crisis." Sansa's voice carries conviction, built from hard experience. "We offer friendship, Your Grace, not submission." Young Rhaego toddles over to Sansa during the negotiation, his wooden dragon clutched in his small fist. He babbles something in Dothraki that makes the northern lady smile despite herself, the first genuine warmth she has shown since entering the throne room. "He has his father's boldness," Sansa observes, allowing the child to climb onto her lap. "But something gentler, too." "His mother's influence, I hope," Daenerys replies. "The next generation must be better than ours, Lady Stark. They must heal wounds we have only learned to inflict." The comment opens something in Sansa's carefully maintained composure. For a moment, the hardened political negotiator gives way to the young woman who has seen too much suffering for her years. "My father trusted in honor and died for it," she says quietly. "My brothers trusted in justice and paid with blood. I won't make the same mistakes, but—" She looks down at Rhaego, who has fallen asleep against her shoulder. "Perhaps trust can be built differently, slowly, with actions instead of words." "Then we have an accord," Daenerys says, rising from the Iron Throne. The North remains part of the Seven Kingdoms, but governs itself by its own customs, a new model for a new age. The agreement ripples through the realm like stone thrown in still water. If the proud North can make peace with the Dragon Queen, perhaps others can follow. Within weeks, similar negotiations begin with Dorne, the Reach, and even the fractured remains of the Westerlands. But political marriages prove more complex than simple treaties. In her private chambers, and Daenerys reviews a stack of correspondence thick enough to stop a sword thrust, offers of alliance through marriage that would bind the great houses to her dynasty, while providing the adult male presence her small council keeps insisting she needs. Lord Willis Tyrell offers considerable advantages, Jorah points out during one of their evening councils. The Reach's grain and gold, naval support from the Arbor, legitimacy through one of the realm's most respected houses. A cripple who tends flowers, snorts Kotho, one of the few Dothraki Khals who remained after the great departure. What strength does such a man bring to the Khaleesi's bed? Strength comes in many forms, Daenerys replies mildly, though the cultural divide still chafes after all these months. Lord Willis brings wisdom, resources, and the loyalty of millions. Those have value beyond the ability to swing a sword. The boy needs a father, Jorah adds carefully. Not just advisors and guardians, but someone who can teach him to be both Targaryen and king. The observation strikes home because it carries truth that Daenerys cannot avoid. Rhaego grows more curious and willful each day, showing signs of both his parents' bloodlines. He commands toy soldiers in Dothraki, while insisting his servants address him in High Valyrian. The fusion of cultures that defines her reign shows most clearly in her son. Arrange a meeting with Lord Willis, she decides finally. If we're to be married, let it be with full knowledge of what we're choosing. The meeting takes place in the Red Keep's Godswood, where heart trees older than the conquest provide shade for conversations that will shape the realm's future. Willis Tyrell proves different from his reputation. Thoughtful rather than weak, learned rather than soft. His withered leg troubles him less than court gossip suggests, and his mind shows the sharpness that kept House Tyrell prosperous through decades of political upheaval. Your Grace honors me with this consideration, he says, as they walk beneath the ancient trees. But I must ask, do you seek a husband, or merely an alliance sealed with marriage vows? The question catches Daenerys off guard with its directness. Most suitors have approached the topic with elaborate courtesies that say nothing while implying everything. I seek stability for my son and my realm, she answers honestly. If that requires marriage, or then marriage it shall be. But I won't pretend to feelings I don't possess. Honesty is a rare gift among royalty, Willis observes with a slight smile. Perhaps we can build something worthwhile on such a foundation. Their betrothal, announced at the summer's end, signals more than personal alliance. It represents the fusion of old Westeros with the new order, the marriage of traditional legitimacy with conquest's harsh reality. The ceremony itself reflects this synthesis. Dothraki horse blessings mixed with sept vows, a celebration that spans from the Red Keep's throne room to the tournament grounds outside the city. But the true measure of Daenerys' transformation shows in smaller moments, quieter victories that rebuild trust one conversation at a time. She establishes courts throughout the realm where grievances can be heard without fear of execution. Former rebels find pardons in exchange for genuine service. Lords who fled during the conquest return to find their lands held in trust rather than seized for redistribution. The treasury bleeds gold, like a wounded man bleeds blood, her new master of coin reports during a small council meeting. Reconstruction costs, reparations to damaged houses, compensation for freed slaves. We spend faster than the realm can generate income. Broken kingdoms cost more than whole ones, Daenerys replies, Every gold dragon spent now saves 10 dragons we would spend fighting endless rebellions. The policy shows results as the realm's second harvest since the conquest proves the largest in decades, whilst trade routes reopen as merchants trust in stable governance. Cities that once cowered behind closed gates now bustle with commerce that benefits conqueror and conquered alike. Young Rhaego thrives in this changing environment, growing from toddler to boy under the watchful eyes of tutors who teach him languages, history, and the arts of both war and peace. His Dothraki lessons come from Cotho and the remaining Khals, while Westerosi masters school him in reading, writing, and the complex dance of feudal politics. He has potential to be great, Maester Qyburn observes during one of Rhaego's lessons. But greatness can take many forms. The challenge is guiding him toward wisdom rather than mere power. His father conquered the 7 kingdoms, Daenerys muses, watching her son practice High Valyrian with a patience that would have amazed Drogo. Perhaps his destiny is to make them one kingdom in truth, not just in name. The observation proves prophetic, as Rhaego shows remarkable ability to move between cultures without losing himself in either. He speaks Dothraki with his mother's guards, common tongue with Westerosi nobles, and High Valyrian during formal ceremonies. The fusion that defines his upbringing may yet heal divisions that have plagued the realm for centuries. As winter's first snows dust the battlements of King's Landing, Daenerys stands in her private chambers and contemplates the path that brought her here. 3 years ago, she was a frightened girl sold to barbarian warriors for her brother's ambitions. Now she rules the 7 kingdoms not through fear or foreign occupation, but through the harder work of earning acceptance, one decision at a time. The transformation has cost her much, her husband, half her army, the simple certainties that once guided her choices. But it has given her something more valuable than conquest, the possibility that her son might inherit a realm united by shared purpose rather than divided by ancient hatred. The Dragon Queen who once promised fire and blood now offers something rarer in the history of the Iron Throne, hope that tomorrow might prove better than today. 5 years have passed since the bells of King's Landing rang out to celebrate Queen Daenerys' marriage to Lord Willis Tyrell, and the realm that emerges from those years bears little resemblance to the kingdom that once bowed to Joffrey Baratheon. The Red Keep's throne room bustles with activity as representatives from across the 7 kingdoms gather for the small council meeting that will shape policy for the coming year. Dothraki voices mix with Westerosi accents as former enemies work side by side to govern a transformed realm. 7-year-old Prince Rhaego sits at a small table beside his mother's throne, carefully copying High Valyrian characters while the adults debate grain shipments and trade agreements. The boy has grown tall for his age, his violet eyes bright with intelligence that seems to absorb every word spoken around him. When Lord Commander Qyburn mentions trouble with pirates in the Stepstones, Rhaego looks up from his writing. "Why don't we send ships to hunt them?" he asks in perfectly pronounced common tongue. "But Uncle Willis says the best way to stop pirates is to sink their ships before they can take anyone else's." Queen Daenerys exchanges glances with her husband, pride and concern warring in her expression. Rhaego shows his father's instinct for direct action, tempered by something gentler, perhaps wisdom inherited from months of careful tutoring in both conquest and governance. "Ships cost gold, my little prince," explains Lady Sansa Stark, now serving as mistress of laws in the new government. "And sailors have families who depend on them returning home safely. We must weigh the cost of action against the cost of inaction." Sansa's presence on the small council would have been unthinkable during the old regime, but she has proven invaluable in bridging the gap between northern independence and royal authority. Her marriage to Lord Robin Arryn the previous year cemented an alliance that brings the Vale's knights under royal protection while respecting ancient customs. "The boy asks good questions," observes Sir Davos Onion Knight, who abandoned Stannis Baratheon's cause after the Pretender's death in a storm off Dragonstone. Perhaps we should consider establishing permanent patrols rather than reactive hunting expeditions. The discussion continues as maps are unrolled and trade routes examined, but Daenerys finds her attention drifting to the changes that 5 years have wrought. The small council itself tells the story, former rebels like Sansa and Davos working alongside Dothraki survivors like Kotho, now styled as Master of Horses, and traditional Westerosi lords who bent the knee during the dark months after conquest. The situation in Essos requires attention as well, reports Ser Jorah, still serving as Hand of the Queen despite his advancing years. The new Khal Temo has united 3 Khalasar and threatens Pentos. Magister Illyrio requests our aid in exchange for continued trading privileges. "We owe Illyrio nothing," growls Kotho in his heavily accented common tongue. "Let the fat man fight his own battles." "We owe Illyrio ships and safe harbor when we needed them most," Daenerys reminds him gently. "Besides, a stable Essos serves our trading interests. Lord Willis, what do your bannermen's ships report from the eastern markets?" Willis Tyrell, elevated from lord to prince consort through their marriage, unfolds a leather portfolio filled with correspondence from Reach merchants. His withered leg troubles him less in the comfortable chair designed specifically for his needs, and his mind remains as sharp as ever. "Silk prices have doubled since the Khalasars began raiding again," he reports, "but spices and precious metals flow freely through Braavos and Pentos. If we can guarantee safe passage, the profits will fund infrastructure improvements throughout the realm." The economic recovery has exceeded even optimistic projections. Trade routes that once carried only slaves and plunder now support legitimate commerce that enriches both sides of the narrow sea. Dothraki connections in Essos, combined with Westerosi naval power, have created unprecedented opportunities for merchants brave enough to sail beyond familiar waters. "I want to see the ships," Prince Rhaego announces, abandoning his writing practice. "And the dragons. When will I get my dragon?" The innocent question draws chuckles from the adults, though it carries deeper implications. No dragons have been seen in Westeros for generations, but the boy's Targaryen blood runs true. Daenerys has noticed his fascination with fire, his ability to handle heated objects that would burn other children, the way flames seem to bend toward him when he stares into hearth fires. "Dragons choose their riders, my love," Daenerys explains patiently. "Perhaps someday one will choose you. Or perhaps I'll find dragon eggs in the ruins of old Valyria," Rhaego replies with the confidence of childhood dreams. Father Drogo always said the strong take what they need. The comment brings uncomfortable silence to the throne room. Khal Drogo's memory looms large in the boy's imagination. They're fed by stories from Kotho and the few remaining Dothraki who remember the great Cole's legendary prowess. But those same warriors have learned to temper tales of conquest with lessons about governance, creating a complex legacy for the boy to inherit. "Your father also learned that taking and keeping are different skills," Daenerys says carefully. "A wise ruler knows when to reach for power and when to reach for understanding." The lesson has applications beyond childhood fancy. Reports from the Wall speak of strange sightings and unusual weather patterns that suggest threats may be stirring in the far north. The Night's Watch sends increasingly urgent requests for men and supplies, though few southern lords take such warnings seriously. Daenerys has learned to pay attention to distant dangers that others dismiss. "Lord Commander Mormont's latest raven arrived this morning," Jorah mentions quietly, as the formal council session ends and advisors begin departing. He reports unusual activity beyond the wall, missing rangers, strange lights in the darkness. "The same reports we've heard for months," Willis observes, though his tone carries concern rather than dismissal. "At what point do we take action against threats we cannot clearly define?" "When those threats manifest," Daenerys replies. "But not before. The realm has bled enough from fighting phantom enemies." The conversation moves to private chambers, where sensitive matters can be discussed away from curious ears and political calculation. Prince Rhaego follows, his wooden dragon tucked under one arm, while he peppers the adults with questions about everything from castle construction to ship design. "Tell me about the Dragon Lords," he requests as they settle into the solar overlooking Blackwater Bay. "The real ones, from before." Daenerys smiles at her son's insatiable curiosity about their family's history. She has tried to balance tales of ancient glory with lessons about the costs of power, teaching him to admire strength while understanding mercy. "They rode dragons into battle and ruled from dragonstone thrones," she begins, settling into the familiar rhythm of storytelling. But their greatest achievement was not conquest, it was creating something that lasted. The roads that connect cities, the laws that protect the innocent, or the peace that allows farmers to plant and merchants to trade. "Did they burn their enemies?" Rhaego asks with the bloodthirsty enthusiasm of youth. "Sometimes," Daenerys admits, "when burning was necessary to protect what they had built. But the wise dragon lords learned that ruling through fear alone creates more enemies than it destroys." The lesson resonates beyond childhood instruction. 5 years of careful governance have transformed former rebels into allies. But Daenerys knows how fragile such transformations can be. Every decision must be weighed against its impact on the delicate balance between Dothraki heritage and Westerosi tradition. "What about the Dothraki kings?" Rhaego continues. "As Uncle Kotho says, they rode from the sunrise to the sunset, and their horses drank from every river in the world." "The Dothraki have no kings," Daenerys corrects gently. "They follow Khals, who earn loyalty through strength and wisdom. Your father was the greatest Khal who ever lived because he combined both qualities." "Will I be a Khal?" the boy asks with 7-year-old seriousness. "You will be a king," Daenerys replies. "But the best kings learn from every tradition that shapes their realm. Dothraki courage, Westerosi justice, Valyrian fire. You carry all these bloodlines, and someday you must unite them in service to your people." The conversation is interrupted by urgent knocking at the solar door. Ser Davos enters with news, written in the tight script that marks important intelligence from the realm's network of ravens and riders. "Your Grace, word from Winterfell. Lady Sansa reports strange happenings in the northern forests. Entire villages found abandoned with no sign of violence, just gone. And the wall's sentries claim to see lights moving in patterns that suggest intelligence." The reports chill the air like a northern wind, despite the solar's southern exposure. Whatever stirs beyond the wall represents a threat unlike any the realm has faced, not political opposition or economic disruption, but something that challenges the natural order itself. "How many men can we muster if the threat proves real?" Willis asks, his strategic mind already calculating logistics and supply chains. 60,000 from the core kingdoms, and perhaps another 20,000 from allies and vassals, Jorah estimates. But fighting in the far north requires different preparations than southern warfare. "Then we begin those preparations," Daenerys decides. "Quietly, without alarming the population, but thoroughly. If something comes from beyond the wall, it will find the 7 kingdoms united and ready." The unity she speaks of represents her greatest achievement, not the conquest that won her the throne, but the patient work of transforming enemies into allies. The realm that prepares to face northern darkness combines the best qualities of all its peoples: Dothraki mobility and courage, northern endurance and honor, southern wealth and sophistication, all bound together by shared purpose. That evening, as stars begin to appear over King's Landing, Daenerys stands with Rhaego on the Red Keep's highest balcony. The city spreads below them like a tapestry woven from 1,000 different threads. Dothraki horse markets beside traditional craft guilds, Eastern spices sold in Western coin, former slaves working as free craftsmen beside nobles who once owned vast estates. "Will you tell me about the dragons again?" Rhaego asks, his violet eyes reflecting the torchlight that illuminates the castle walls. "Dragons are fire-made flesh," Daenerys says, drawing her son close against the evening chill. They represent power in its purest form, the ability to create or destroy with equal ease. That's why dragon lords must be more than just strong. They must be wise enough to know when creation serves better than destruction. And if the lights come from the north, the boy asks with surprising perceptiveness for his age, then dragons will rise to meet them, Daenerys promises, though no living dragon has answered Targaryen calls for generations. And if dragons do not come, then the realm we have built together will prove strong enough to stand without them. The promise carries weight that extends beyond reassurance to a frightened child. In the 5 years since Drogo's death, Daenerys has learned that true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to build something worth preserving. The Iron Throne beneath her represents not conquest, but responsibility, the duty to protect millions of people who have learned to trust in tomorrow's promise of peace. Whatever darkness may come from the far north will find the 7 kingdoms changed, but not broken, united but not uniform, strong in ways that go beyond the reach of armies or the fire of dragons. The girl who once crossed the narrow sea with only barbarian warriors for protection has become the queen who united a continent through the harder path of earning loyalty rather than demanding submission. The Dragon Queen's greatest victory was not in taking the Iron Throne, but in transforming it into something worthy of the blood it cost to claim.